What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 9ts Chapter 156 Vizard's Attitude, Take the Initiative. Advertisement. Seeing the three people recovering under the Kaido light, the expressions of the others in Vizard eased a lot. As long as there is no life-threatening life, everything is easy to say. The Shinigami's medical system is still very developed, and it is not a problem to have broken hands or feet. For example, Kurotsuchi Myuri, the current director of the Technology Development Bureau, has almost completely remodeled himself. Changing the heart and kidney is already a very common operation for him. The Technical Development Bureau can even repair the damaged Zanpakutō. For some unconventional injuries and illnesses, there is absolutely no problem when they are handed over to the Technology Development Bureau. However, after treatment, if there are any side effects, they can't guarantee this. Therefore, it is not when it is necessary that the team members of Go-Day 13 will never hand themselves over to the Technical Development Bureau. Under Kaido's healing, Hirako Shinji and others also regained consciousness. When Mugeruma Kensai woke up, he subconsciously assumed an attacking posture. However, after seeing that the person treating him was Shimo, his expression became a little nervous. He hadn't forgotten the battle that took place before the coma. The 90 Hado black coffin that gave up the chant is to abolish his fighting power. This strength is enough to win his respect. Although Mugeruma Kensai has no hollow, there is no solution either. But when he saw the other two equally miserable companions, he felt a lot better in his heart. Mugeruma Kensai sighed, "How long have I been in a coma?" Hirako Shinji raised his chin slightly, his eyes blinked, and a familiar strange smile appeared on his face. "It's probably less than 2 minutes. Hearing that, Love Akawa on the side speaks. "I regret to tell you that it is 1 minute and 10 seconds. His own hollow time can only last for less than 3 minutes. So when fighting, the control of time is very good. After a battle, including the time lost by Mugeruma Kensai, the three of them did not delay for 2 minutes. It is inevitable that these three former Shinigami captains and current Vizard members are somewhat discouraged. However, the truth lies here. No matter how discouraged, there is nothing to do. If I can, I would rather die." The expression on Mugeruma Kensai's face looks very angry. Losing to others is not an unacceptable thing, but when the three people add up, they didn't hold on for 2 minutes in the hands of others. It's really shameful. Mugeruma Kensai felt the dignity he had accumulated over the past few hundred years. This one was thrown to the ground and crushed severely. This feeling is not enough for outsiders. Mr. Shimo. Hirako Shinji suddenly remembered the purpose of waiting for someone. In other words, we seem to be inviting you to discuss cooperation, right? This was suddenly violently beaten, and it was inevitable that it was a little unacceptable in my heart. Shimo smiled on his forehead. The matter of cooperation, of course, is okay. Your strength is also in the middle level among the current captains. As for specific matters, after I go back, I will discuss with Captain Yamamoto. Hearing this, Hirako Shinji breathed a sigh of relief. Although I am very dissatisfied with the sentence of the lingering court. Even now, in the hearts of Vizard and others, some people do not agree with the cooperation. Hirako Shinji also relied on his core identity in Vizard to forcibly suppress these dissatisfaction. Because, according to the information he has obtained, if Vizard and Jing Ling Ting do not choose to cooperate, in the future war between the two worlds, it will inevitably be defeated. That kind of weird imaginary in Manor Grande, while the strength soared, the combat power also greatly leapt. The crazy way of fighting and the endless greed for the soul made Hirako Shinji shudder. By the way, I have an intelligence to tell you. Shimo suddenly remembered Urahara Kazuki's research. Hirako Shinji froze for a moment, then smiled. "Shimo, first please say that." Shimo's tone became slightly solemn, and he said solemnly, "9 changes in part of the virtual reality. Thinking of you, should all of you be screaming?" He looked around at the crowd and didn't look much surprised when he saw them. "Because we discovered this, we approached the Link Court to talk about cooperation." Yamaru Lisa walked out of the crowd, her eyes burning with a serious expression. "Our preliminary investigation revealed. Those crazy imaginaries are at least 3 times stronger than ordinary imaginaries. As for Manor Grande, I haven't encountered it." Advertisement. Shimo nodded, understanding their thoughts and existence like Manor Grande has been monitored by the Technology Development Bureau. Anyone appearing in this world will inevitably notify Shinigami of the 3rd, 5th, and 13th divisions and let them go to encircle and suppress. When necessary, the 11th division will also participate in the battle. Vizard didn't want to have direct contact with the Lingling Court, so he didn't search for information about Manor Grande. "I can tell you exactly," Shimo said lightly. "Manor Grande's strength is also more than 3 times stronger. Not only that, but so is Arankar. And the information I want to talk about is precisely related to these abnormal changes." Later, he told the results of Urahara Kazuki's research to everyone in Vizard. In other words, the combat power of Hueco Mundo should more than double. Not only that, the opponent's combat effectiveness has also increased too much, rising to a real war of two worlds. no matter how much he has, just kill them all. Wow, make a decision and then move. Vizard talked about it, discussing related matters. Hirako, what do you think? Shimo set his sights on Hirako Shinji, the central figure of Vizard. Facing his question, Naoko Hirako pondered for a moment and solemnly said, "Take the initiative." As soon as these words came out, there was silence in the court. A light breeze blows, raising dust and sweeping past the gravel. Vizard stared at Hirako Shinji blankly, with an incredible look in his eyes. Snapped. The flipping slippers hit Hirako Shinji's face again. The red mark, which had not been eliminated, suddenly deepened again. Bald Hirako, are you crazy? Sarugaki Hiyori exclaimed with shocked expression. That's the base camp of the opponent, we went, and it is very likely that all will die there. 1. Hirako Shinji took off the slippers from his face and rubbed his face without any emotional fluctuations. Hey, it's better than waiting for the other party to invade. While discussing the lonely situation, when it comes to an end, you can know that Aizen and the others are gathering their own strength. The transformation of the soul cannot be completed overnight. Hirako Shinji calmly analyzed, if you give the other party enough time to prepare, then what awaits us is bound to perish. Hearing that, except Shimo and Nilu, everyone's complexion has become very ugly. They set Aizen as their enemy, exhausted their strength, still just thinking about how to defeat each other. But from the current situation, it's Aizen's staff alone, they may not be able to solve it. Hirako makes a lot of sense in his analysis. Yopomaru Lisa calmly said, so I hope you can convey our meaning. By now, even the most grumpy Sarugaki Hiyori has been silent. Obviously, the people at Vizard have realized the seriousness of the situation. Shimo nodded and said, I see, but take the initiative to attack this matter. He hesitated for a moment and decided to speak truthfully. We still need to let Captain Yamamoto make a decision. But based on my judgment, he is likely to agree to this plan. Chronicle's guess is not unreasonable. The urging of Central 46, the humiliation of Soul Society, the potential threat of Aizen, etc. The combination of various reasons is likely to cause the stubborn old man to change his mind. The collective death of the 46th room of the previous session caused a slight delusion of persecution in the 46th room of this session. Aizen hasn't been solved for a day, and the guys can't feel at ease for a day. The unjust cases that have been deceived for more than 200 years and the defection of the 3 captains have also become one of the greatest humiliations of the entire Soul Society. Although Yamamoto's character has eased a lot, he still sticks to his stubbornness in some respects. Seeking flowers. Hirako Shinji heard Shimo's words and heaved a sigh of relief. After a difficult battle, his trust in Shishi has risen a lot. In his opinion, a person like Shimo does not bother to deceive himself and others. In that case, thank you Mr. Shimo. Hirako Shinji lowered his head slightly, lowering his attitude. Advertisement. Shimo nodded, quite satisfied with his performance. This is like an attitude of cooperation. It's like a little irritable little guy who always looks at others with murderous eyes. Later, Lisa Yumaru asked about Kyōraku Shunsui. Shimo didn't conceal it, but told each other one by one. As the former deputy captain of the 8th Division, Yopomaru Lisa still respects Kyōraku Shunsui. Even Kyōraku Shunsui at the time was still unreliable. Visored outside the base. Shimo's fingers tapped into the air, and the gate appeared in front of him. He turned his head, looked at Hirako Shinji and others, and said goodbye. Everyone, next time you meet, maybe it will be on the battlefield. You guys, you must live to that time. Hearing this, everyone looked startled. When Sarugaki Hiyori was about to attack, he saw Shimo holding Nilu's hand and stepping directly into the piercing gate. What an annoying guy. Muguruma Kensai breathed a sigh of relief when Shimo finally left. Hirako Shinji looked at the place where the crossing gate disappeared, his eyes a bit deep. Mr. Shimo is a very dangerous person. Sarugaki Hiyori curled his mouth and said with a look of disdain. What is dangerous? I just feel that this guy has a very bad personality. Be the same as that Urahara Kazuki. Hearing that, everyone looked weird and said in their hearts. Is there anything worse than your character? In the passage through the boundary gate. Shimo was thinking in his heart following Nilu's follow. Although Visored's strength is nothing to him but the soldiers will face each other. These guys are still very useful to solve Arankar and Espada. Visored after Hollow, Ryotsu showed an increase of several times. In terms of strength, he is already qualified. Nilu, what do you think of the group of Visored? Upon hearing this, Nilu's eyes drooped and she fell into thinking. After a while, she whispered, mediocre. Shimo is speechless for a while, and he really doesn't give a bit of face. As the former 3rd Espada, Nilu has sufficient confidence in strength. After being suppressed by the Restorer, she is bound to occupy a place again in Espada. Although it is true. Shimo sighed, but it's better not to speak in front of the group of people. People are now our allies. Nilu widened her eyes, looked at Shimo, and after a few blinks, she replied. Well, I listened to Shimo. After a while, the two arrived at the end of the gate and returned to Soul Society. Because when I left from the first team. After returning, he also appeared in front of the first team's crossing gate. After greeted Shiro Changya Genshiro, who was guarding through the gate, he walked to the captain's house. In his perception, Yamamoto Genryusai is in the team house. After a brief notification, Shimo met Yamamoto Genryusai again. Thank you, Captain Shimo. Yamamoto Genryusai is very polite to the time. Although in the information just returned, his battle with Manos Grande destroyed half of the city. Captain Yamamoto. Shimo nodded slightly to show respect. If you think about the chaos in this world, you should already understand it. Sweeping his eyes, he noticed the intelligence file on the table. Yamamoto nodded, his voice was old and serious. The severity of the chaos in this world is far beyond the old man's imagination. Shimo answered. In that case, I have a proposal. Yamamoto was surprised and asked, what proposal? Shimo brewed his emotions for a while, and said solemnly. Enter, Hueco Mundo, 0. Chapter 157 Kurotsuchi Myuri's Discovery and Ambition. Advertisement. 3 days have passed since Shimo made his suggestion. Yamamoto Genryusai did not give an accurate answer. Even Shimo analyzed all the pros and cons. Although according to Urahara Kazuki's judgment, Aizen still needs 2 months to fully integrate Hogyoku. Yamamoto Genryusai has plenty of time to consider this matter. However, he agreed to Vizard's proposal first, and entrusted Shimo to express his goodwill to them. Since as a victim, Vizard's crimes that have been condemned should be rehabilitated. The specific process may take some time. Yamamoto Genryusai decided to submit a review of this matter to Central 46. As the captain of Go-Day 13, he could not interfere with the decision made by Room 46. However, under certain circumstances, the above statement can still be carried out. It is said that Central 46 does not have too many objections to this matter. On the contrary, when it comes to the purpose of Vizard, the attitude of these guys suddenly becomes a little eager. He even suggested that Hiriko Shinji return to the Stagnation Palace as the captain of the 5th Division. When Shimo learned about this, he couldn't help but laugh. Sure enough, when you hit a high position, it will always be corroded. The Dragon Slayer will eventually be a dragon, however, he has no objection to this. After relaying the matter through Urahara Kazuki, Vizard gave a thoughtful answer. Suddenly let them return to the Lingting Palace again. The huge gap in the 863 situation will inevitably make these people feel uncomfortable. Except for Sarugaki Hiyori, who expressed disgust and dislike for Shinigami, the rest of the people still miss the time they used to be in the Yuling Palace. It takes some time to consider whether to go back. After solving the chaos in the present world, Shimo's mission was completed, and he returned to the 3rd Division team house to continue his life like a fish. However, this situation did not last too long. On the 4th day of his return from this world, a guest suddenly came to his door and broke his plan today. Captain Shimo. Ni Yinmeng was very respectful. Master Nier asked me to invite you to the Technology Development Bureau. Shimo's face was surprised, somewhat surprised. Kurotsuchi Myuri invites me over? Which nerve is he wrong? Kurotsuchi Myuri has spied on his Zanpakutō's power many times, and Shimo has taught him a lesson. And warn him if something similar happens again, it's not just a simple matter of imposing punishment. Really start, Shimo is confident that Kurotsuchi Myuri will be completely crushed. Not to mention that it turns into a liquid, even if it turns into a gas, he is sure to let it die forever. Ni Yinmeng lowered his head, his voice still calm. Sorry, Captain Shihei. Master Nirvana did not tell me the details. My task is just to ask you to go over. Shimo's forehead, thinking for a moment, smiled. I see. You go back first, I will ask for it later. Ni Yinmeng didn't doubt the words, she stood up and said respectfully. Thank you Captain Shimo for understanding. I will be in the Technology Development Bureau, waiting for you. After all, without waiting for Shimo's response, she turned and left the 3rd Division team house. Seeing his leaving back, Shimo bends his fingers and gently taps on the table in front of him. The guy Kurotsuchi Myuri has always been unprofitable. It looks like he has discovered something beyond his ability. Or, it's something related to me. After many collaborations, Shimo already knows Kurotsuchi Myuri's character very well. In addition to the madman's thoughts, it is more about chasing imperfect existence. As for the rest, they believe in the so-called equivalent exchange. Of course, only for others Kurotsuchi Myuri itself is not a good person. Nilu, do you want to go with you too? Shimo picked up the wineglass on the table, drank it, and turned to look at Nilu, who was studying hard. In order to integrate into the life in the spiritual court, Nixia has been studying Shinigami's norms, words and deeds, etc. Hearing this, Nilu covered her face with a book and exposed her eyes. A hint of joy flashed in her, and she asked in a low voice. Is it okay? Shimo nodded and smiled. Sure. For Nilu, Shimo tends to be extremely tolerant. In the history of Soul Society, Manos Grande, who joined Go-Day 13, is only one case of Nilu. And the reason for this is entirely because she is attached to herself. Ni Yinmeng didn't doubt the words, she stood up and said respectfully. Thank you Captain Shimo for understanding. I will be in the Technology Development Bureau, waiting for you. After all, without waiting for Shimo's response, she turned and left the 3rd Division team house. Advertisement seeing his leaving back, Shimo bends his fingers and gently taps on the table in front of him. The guy Kurotsuchi Myuri has always been unprofitable. It looks like he has discovered something beyond his ability. Or, it's something related to me. After many collaborations, Shimo already knows Kurotsuchi Myuri's character very well. In addition to that crazy idea, more is to pursue imperfect existence. As for the rest, they believe in the so-called equivalent exchange. Of course, only for others Kurotsuchi Myuri itself is not a good person. Nilu, do you want to go with you too? Shimo picked up the wineglass on the table, drank it, and turned to look at Nilu who was studying hard. In order to integrate into the life in the spiritual court, Nixia has been studying Shinigami's norms, words and deeds, etc. Hearing this, Nilu covered her face with a book and exposed her eyes. A hint of joy flashed in her, and she asked in a low voice. Is it okay? Shimo nodded and smiled. Sure. For Nilu, Shimo tends to be extremely tolerant. In the history of Soul Society, Manos Grande who joined Gote 13 is only one case of Nilu. And the reason for this is entirely because she is attached to herself. How could Shimo treat Nilu badly? Yeah, I like Shimo the most. Ni cheered and bumped into Shimo's arms. Boom! The strong impact force caused a dull sound. However, Shimo did not mobilize Ryotsu to defend like before. With Void Steel Skin, he has reached a very high level of defense. After returning to Soul Society, Shimo specifically tested his defense. A tentative attack at the captain level cannot cause damage to it. As for the breakthrough value of defensive power, Shimo did not try. His Ryotsu will grow with the trials of the ladder of time, and his defensive power will also be the same. Maybe he tested out the defensive value today, and will restudy it in half a month. Instead of spending this time, it's better to be a fat fish. Facing Shimo, Nilu always couldn't control her joyful emotions. Every time he was happy, he would rush into his arms with a super accelerated attitude. Fortunately, with the Void Steel Skin, Shimo doesn't have to worry too much about injuries. Shimo stroked his soft turquoise long hair, sniffing the smell from Nilu. Maybe this is what I want to protect. The 12th Division. Technology Development Bureau. After Shimo came here, he did not attract the attention of the team members. The players of the 12th Division seemed to be infected by their own match. When researching, I can always be immersed in it. It was the first time to come to the 12th Division team house. Nilu looked up and down curiously. I showed strong curiosity about the facilities and equipment here. The members of the 12th Division also look strange. For example, the head of the Communication Technology Research Division and the Radio Measurement Division, Ma Zhou. The elliptical head is like a large toad that has failed evolution. When he was staring at the screen in front of him, his eyeballs popped out of his eye sockets, which looked terrifying. On the other hand, Ponjo didn't care. He pressed his eyeball back with his backhand and continued his work. These guys seem to have gone too far in reforming themselves. Shimo looks around. Everyone in Jipping is busy with their work. The impact caused by the previous illusion is still maintained in the 12th Division. Ni Yanmeng hurriedly walked out of the Technical Development Bureau and came to Shimo. Captain Shimo. She nodded slightly to show her respect. Please follow me. Because he has been in the Technical Development Bureau for a long time, Shimo is quite familiar with the environment structure here. After passing through 4 corridors and 3 security doors, Shimo finally saw Kurotsuchi Myuri with a crazy face. After seeing Shimo come, Meowli laughed harshly as if scratching glass. Haha, Captain Shimo. You are finally here, hurry up and see my new discoveries. Facing Shimo, Kurotsuchi Myuri seems to have forgotten all his unhappiness. He eagerly invited Shimo to come to his private laboratory. Under his leadership, Shimo walked to a glass container. One of them is a black, unidentified foreign body, standing still in it. Upon seeing this, Shimo frowned slightly. What is this? Kurotsuchi Myuri smiled mysteriously, and his negative smile fits his current makeup. The pale complexion, like an evil spirit. Jia ha ha, don't blink your eyes. Advertisement under Shiki's gaze. Demoli stretched out 1,000 fingers with slender nails and pressed the button on the side console. The next moment, white mist rises in the container. Shimo raised his brows lightly and said, condensed Lingza mist? He glanced at Yu Li a little unexpectedly. This thing is not difficult to study, but the cost of manufacturing is quite high. It takes a lot of time and energy to compress the inherent concentration of spirits to reach the level of aerosol. Generally speaking, Kurotsuchi Myuri cherishes this kind of resource. The corners of the cocoon's mouth are wide open, and the teeth are brilliant golden. Hey, it's just what is necessary for the research. Please keep watching. As Lingza aerosol envelops the black foreign object, Shimo finally noticed the abnormality. He churned his brows together and sighed slightly. In the container, there are distortions and abnormal movements at the spatial level. Although the effect is very weak, it actually appears. Where did you get this thing? Shimo looked at Kurotsuchi Myuri. He had already released Reiko's mist to the end and the black foreign object, as if it was rejuvenated, moved its body in the container. The corners of Hunmao's mouth pulled ultimate towards both sides, and his smile was very penetrating. Of course from this world. Hearing that, Shimo had a conjecture in his heart, and said, "This thing is imaginary." Kurotsuchi Myuri snapped his fingers and said loudly, "Congratulations, you got it. Unfortunately, I didn't reward you." Before Shimo could speak, Kurotsuchi Myuri continued. "According to my many research findings in the past few days, the characteristics of this thing are very similar to Captain Shimo's Zanpakutō ability." Shimo pondered and said subconsciously, "Space stagnation. When did you get this thing?" He raised his head and looked at Kurotsuchi Myuri. Kurotsuchi Myuri was stunned for a moment and immediately thought. 2 days ago, I was studying how to amplify the power of the meat bomb that day, and tried to place it on Mano's Grande. Unfortunately, the experiment failed. For this, I lost a heart and 2 kidney swellings. Upon hearing this, Shimo determined the correctness of his thoughts. Ulquiorra and Yami came to this world to fight with themselves, and they should have a certain relationship with this weird guy in front of them. Thinking of this, Shimo's mouth rose slightly, and he secretly said in his heart, "Aizen, I'm really struggling to deal with me. Even the ability of space, have you begun to consider it?" He turned to look at Kurotsuchi Myuri, who was still talking, and asked, "Then what is your purpose?" Kurotsuchi Myuri's words stopped abruptly, and a smile of conspiracy emerged. 0.0. Jhaha, Captain Shimo, isn't my purpose clear enough? If you want to solve this strange guide that may appear in the future, Lu must cooperate with me. After I help you research out the ability against this thing, you can fight without any worries." Before he finished speaking, Shimo interrupted, "When did you have the illusion that I need your help?" Kurotsuchi Myuri was taken aback for a moment, and a look of doubt appeared on his face. "What's the meaning?" Shimo's fingers pressed against the glass container. "Reiatsu penetration. Do you really think this thing can pose a threat to me?" Stagnant space, appearing in the container. In an instant, the black foreign matter in it was broken down into countless tiny pieces. Upon seeing this, Kurotsuchi Myuri's pupils shrank suddenly, like the tip of a needle. From his perspective, he can clearly see the changes in the container. The powerful spatial force shrouded the black foreign matter and shattered it in an instant. Even through the Reiatsu isolator, Shimo's power can still penetrate it. This power is really shocking. Kurotsuchi Myuri's golden teeth were biting tightly, pressing down the horror in his heart so as not to be noticed by Shimo. However, put away your little thoughts. Shimo's eyes drooped slightly, and a little disdain appeared in it. Guy looks at strength that doesn't belong to you. Eventually, I will incur disaster for myself. Chapter 158, Hueco Mundo, Crusade against the Team, a special mission. Advertisement. Shimo had some guesses about the appearance of this black foreign body. It's like the special errand car made by Aizen, like Kondoi's Margera. His home blade is called the Firefighting Prince, which was specifically used to target Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, and is the biggest star of his Zanpakutō Ryujin Jaka. At the moment, it is clear that Aizen is targeting himself, trying to recite the ability of Hogyoku to make errand car to block one's own space ability. As for the success, Shimo doesn't know and doesn't care. Space ability is just one of his methods. Among its many abilities, this is already the most common. If Aizen really only wants to target his spatial ability, then when it comes to the decisive battle, the time will inevitably give him a great surprise. With the gradual increase in strength, Shimo is no longer confined to Aizen, but is targeting more secretive people. For example, above the sky, Shimo threw the daylight onto the container again, and the thin air-cutting blade turned it into nothingness. From this alone, one can vaguely perceive that something is just a semi-finished product. No, maybe it's not even a semi-finished product, it's just a prototype with spatial characteristics. However, everything is difficult at the beginning. Shimo still believes in Aizen's research ability. In the coming period of time, there will be countless similar imaginaries appearing in Hueco Mundo, or in the present world. The smile on Kurotsuchi Myuri's face disappeared, and there was a faintly gloomy color among the blinking eyes. His request was refused time and time again, but there was no way Shimo could do anything. This kind of unknown thing was placed in front of him, but the feeling that he couldn't detect it gradually made his psychology go to an extreme. Damn it, the creak of teeth grinding sounded in the private laboratory. Shimo raised his eyes and glanced at Kurotsuchi Myuri, and found that the other party did not hide his desire and greed in his heart. Curiosity is the primary driving force for scientific progress. Shimo said lightly, but being overly curious will eventually push people into the abyss. This is my last warning to you. After all, he looked at Nilu, who was watching around in the laboratory, and whispered, "Nisho, let's go." The two immediately left the Technology Development Bureau. Shimo's warning made Kurotsuchi Myuri lost his thoughts. His thoughts lingered between curiosity and danger. Should Jing take this last step? Kurotsuchi Myuri's self-talking voice echoed in the private laboratory. Shimo, who left the Technical Development Bureau, received a special message. The object in charge of this communication is a hell butterfly flying in the air. Shimo stretched out his finger to let it fall on it. Small sky is quite empty. Luo Lianshun. A voice appeared in Shimo's ear. Captain Shimo. Shimo's brows moved slightly, distinguishing the owner of the voice. Vice Captain Chojiro. Chojiro Sasaki's voice is a bit heavy, with a little weirdness in his tone. For your counter-offensive suggestions to Captain Yamamoto. Central 46 has been fully approved. Captain Yamamoto also has no objection. Shimo listened quietly, his expression unchanged, but because of the safety of Soul Society. In this attack, Hueco Mundo, Captain Yamamoto will not be involved. Hearing that, Shimo was not surprised. This kind of thing is normal if all players attack Hueco Mundo. Then Aizen stole his hometown with a backhand, which was dumbfounded. So, he left this task to you. Shimo, does this count as shooting yourself in the foot? Why did it end up on my head in the end? But the captain did not let you go to Hueco Mundo alone. In addition to Vizard, you can also choose 4 captains from Gote 13 to accompany you. Chojiro Sasaki's voice is a bit serious, including the selected deputy captain. And all this will be done after the intelligence investigation of Hueco Mundo is over. Shimo's eyes flowed, passing his own voice through Ryotsu transmission. I see. I will consider this matter carefully. The moment his voice fell, the familiar system voice sounded. The new check-in task has been released. Please check in the Palace of the Night by the host. Close black lens bracket. Task reward. Sero, need to open the virtual system. Hey, it looks like I'm going to have a snack now. Advertisement. Shimo took a breath, his expression a bit solemn. With the end of the call, the hell butterfly fluttered in his hand and returned in the direction it came. Seeing the hell butterfly turned into a black spot, he was also plunged into thinking. Regarding the change in Arankar's strength, he has to be cautious in the selection of helpers. Most of the current captains have a good relationship with him. If there are casualties in Hueco Mundo, Shimo's heart will not feel good. By the way, who are you looking for? Shimo pondered it carefully, a little bit awkward. First exclude the 2 disciples of Yamamoto Genryuze, Kyōraku Shunsui and Jashiro Yugataki. Even if they were willing to follow the past, it is estimated that Yamamoto Yuan Liujian would not agree. Broken B can think about it, but it's lacking in strength, almost meaning. Taking the enhanced Arankar as an example, it is estimated that she can only bully Zamari and his like. Sister Wa can be considered, and if she is strong enough, she can still carry out rescue operations. It's okay. As soon as the Baidi sword was released, an Espada was hacked to death, which shouldn't be a big problem. As for Zaraki Kenpachi, after hearing about this, he should take the initiative to find himself. In this way, add a Kurotsuchi Myuri. Seping has become the team to fight against Hueco Mundo in the original book. Shimo was thinking, and suddenly realized that he had walked back to the 3rd Division team house. In the captain's team house, a familiar figure, sitting in the position where he usually sits. The black drooping ponytail covers the back, the slender legs sit cross-legged, and the thin arms support his head, giving people a sense of boredom. I forgot to consider my own deputy captain. Shimo laughed blankly and walked towards the captain's team house. Sister Yoruichi, is this waiting for me? Hearing Shimo's voice, Shihu and Yoruichi turned around and saw the 2 return leisurely from outside. His eyes became a bit resentful for a while. Leave all the tasks of the 3rd Division to me, and then go outside and get away with Nilu by yourself? Shihu and Yoruichi puts his hands on Shimo's shoulders, eyes facing each other. Hearing that, Shimo's expression was a bit awkward. Although these words are somewhat different from reality. But generally speaking, there is no problem. This matter, you can't just look at the surface. Shimo tried to restore his image. However, Shihu and Yoruichi moved forward a little further, a soft voice rang in his ears. Surface, Ni saw the scene in front of her, her mouth pursed slightly, she was a little bit dissatisfied. Shimo is mine. When the voice fell, she hugged Shimo tightly from behind. Ahem. Shimo coughed slightly, his hands seemed to be nowhere to rest for a while. Fortunately, Shihu and Yoruichi stopped in time and let go of him. Well, I won't make trouble with you. I came to you, there is indeed something to do. After getting serious, sit back to his original position. Nilu also loosened her hands cleverly and sat quietly. What's the matter? Shihu and Yoruichi served as the captain of the 2nd Division, and his ability to handle affairs far surpasses Shimo. No, it should be said that any captain can surpass him in handling official affairs. Shihu and Yoruichi frowned slightly and seemed to have a headache. You haven't forgotten the main responsibilities of the 3rd Division? Shimo was taken aback, and immediately replied, of course I didn't forget. As a support team, we need to support those teams that are understaffed at any time. Under special circumstances, it is also necessary to provide assistance to other troops, such as Kendo. Hearing that, Shihu and Yoruichi's mouth raised slightly and smiled. As the captain, it is not easy for you to remember this. To get rid of one's own son at times to pretend to be embarrassed. So, a new task is here.
Shihuan also took out the document from his arms and put it in front of Shimo.
Shimo's eyes twitched slightly as he watched this movement.
Do you just do whatever you want? For the Spiritual Arts Academy, a Kendo teacher is needed.
Shihuan Yoruichi explained, you should know that I am not good at Kendo. In addition, the other officials are all allowed to perform tasks. Advertisement, even Kira went to the 8th division to collect information.
Hearing this, Shimo rubbed his eyebrows. Why is there a sudden lack of Kendo teachers in the Spiritual Academy? Shihuan Yoruichi drew circles on the document with his fingers, and said. It seems that Shinigami named Miyano Kaide died in a mission. Although that Shu was killed by another team member, he could not save his life after all. As for the new Kendo teacher, he is already being selected.
Hearing this, Shimo's expression was a little surprised. Miyano Kaide, dead? Shimo still has some impression of this former Kendo teacher. Although he didn't teach himself anything, after a long time, he sighed slightly.
Unexpected and pleasant surprises, you never know who will come first.
After thinking for a while, Shimo decided to take on this special task. Think of it as helping Miyano Kaide's career draw a perfect end. Your business is over. Shimo looked at Shihuan Yoruichi and said. I still have a task here, do you want to go with it?
Shihuan Yoruichi blinked his eyes, revealing a cat-like cunning.
You speak first, let me consider it. Shimo did not hesitate, and directly informed her of the events of the past 2 days. So, are you going to enter Hueco Mundo? Shihuan Yoruichi's face is a bit less ethical, more solemn.
Shimo's forehead, 863 said. Including me, there will be a total of 5 captains and adjutants going.
Besides, there's the visored group. After listening, Shihuan Yoruichi looks down, seems to be thinking about the pros and cons.
After a while, she raised her eyes to Shimo, decisively.
Go. Shimo was taken aback for a moment, and persuaded. Hueco Mundo is very dangerous, and we are likely to get stuck in it. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Shihuan Yoruichi.
Because it is very dangerous, I have to go with it.
Your safety is more important than anything in my eyes.
Looking at Shihuan Yoruichi's solemn expression, Shimo was slightly startled, then the corners of his mouth rose, and he smiled.
I see. I want to go together too. Shimo followed the voice and saw Nilu, who was sitting still pulling his arm. There is a firm look in the golden-green eyes. The team to defeat Hueco Mundo is temporarily set. Shimo also put this matter aside temporarily before the relevant information was communicated back. Yamamoto Genryuze would not allow them to go to Hueco Mundo. For now, let's think about how to teach this matter. Ziyang Spiritual Academy. For Shimo's arrival, the dean of the Spiritual Academy expressed a warm welcome. However, in Shimo's view, his task is only limited to the flattery of superiors and superiors. Special class. Have you heard? A young man with slightly yellowed hair with a mysterious expression. Today, a new Kendo teacher will be sent to us from above. Oh, your news is too late, someone disdainfully said. I heard that I was a captain. Captain? How is it possible? How can a strong man of that level teach us Kendo? The yellow-haired boy who had spoken earlier turned a little excited. If it is really the captain, then we must have made a lot of money this time. A lot of discussions spread outside the classroom. Ryotsu oppressed, like a landslide, covering the entire classroom. Suddenly, the sound stopped abruptly. Shipai walked into it slowly, and the symbol on his Captain Yuri appeared in the eyes of everyone. Frightened, take everyone's heart away. They stared blankly at Shinigami on the stage, unable to believe their eyes. At this time, the thoughts that appeared in everyone's hearts were surprisingly consistent. The legendary captain of the 3rd Division actually came to teach us Kendo? Chapter 159 Kendo Teaching, Unexpected Coincidence. Advertisement for the captain of the almost existing rumors, the students of the Spiritual Arts Academy. I have heard about it for a long time. Except for a few first-timers from Rukongai who have just joined the Spiritual Academy, most of the students have heard of the name of the captain of the 3rd Division. Kyōraku Shimo, a member of the superior Kyōraku family, fought hard against the captain of the battle division Zaraki Kenpachi, and cut the Manos Grande enemy without a slight injury, and killed the former 9th Division captain Tusen Kanami in the Double Strong Hill. His every record is enough to make Shinigami look up to more than 99. At the same time, most of the students in the Spiritual Academy regarded Shimo as their object of worship. The emergence of this situation caused Shimo to appear on the podium. It just maintained a moment of tranquility. During this moment, everyone held their breath and paid attention to Shimo's every move. However, after a while, Shimo spoke. Everyone, because of the death of Mr. Miyano Kaide, the new teacher has not been selected for the time being. So, for the time being, I will be your Kendo teacher. If you have any comments, please submit them. Compared to some facial paralysis, Shimo doesn't have that kind of big-name air. Strictly speaking, in this respect, he is somewhat similar to Aizen. Of course, it is Aizen in disguise. As his voice fell, shock and cheers almost lifted the entire roof. The enthusiasm of the students far exceeded Shimo's imagination. For the order of the classroom, Shimo had to release himself Ryotsu again. A small part of the ultimate Ryotsu, covering the entire classroom in an instant. For a time, shattering like a chill when they felt this terrifying Ryotsu, everyone felt as if they were staring at an endless abyss. The fear of death was shrouded in their hearts. It seems that I still need to follow my ideas. Shimo Weijung scratches his eyebrows, a bit of a headache. It's okay to let him chop people, and teaching people is really a bit worrying. Although his kendo level is among the captains, he is considered a very strong presence. But where to teach it, it's really a bit worrying. Thought of this, he slowed down Ryotsu's suppression slightly. Can anyone tell me the progress of the kendo course? Everyone looked at each other, and after a while, someone raised their hands tremblingly. Shimo nodded, and Ryotsu relieved the pressure on him under his control. In actual combat, Miya and Kaide Miyano have taught us all the basics of kendo. The college student looked a little thin, and although his eyes dodged, he was unexpectedly firm. However, he was able to raise his hand under the pressure of Ryotsu just now to prove that his character and potential are still quite good. Upon hearing this, Shimo nodded thoughtfully. It turned out to have entered the actual combat stage. Before, Shimo was a student of Kaide Miyano. Although he didn't learn anything from him, he was quite familiar with the teaching process. There are different teaching processes for different students. Starting from the simplest basics of kendo, holding a sword, slashing. It has been maintained until the actual combat stage, fighting in pairs. Miyano Kaide is responsible for finding out the shortcomings of the academy students from the two warring parties and giving new guidance. This kind of teaching method is the most suitable for Shimo. If it is a systematic kendo teaching, it actually makes it feel like a lot of restraint. If this is the case, let's allocate the battle team. When they felt this terrifying Ryotsu, everyone felt as if they were staring at an endless abyss. The fear of death was shrouded in their hearts. It seems that I still need to follow my ideas. Shimo Weijung scratches his eyebrows, a bit of a headache. It's okay to let him chop people, and teaching people is really a bit worrying. Although his kendo level is among the captains, he is considered a very strong presence. But where to teach it, it's really a bit worrying. Thought of this, he slowed down Ryotsu's suppression slightly. Can anyone tell me the progress of the kendo course? Everyone looked at each other, and after a while, someone raised their hands tremblingly. Shimo nodded, and Ryotsu relieved the pressure on him under his control. In actual combat, Miya and Kaide Miyano have taught us all the basics of kendo. The college student looked a little thin, and although his eyes dodged, he was unexpectedly firm. However, he was able to raise his hand under the pressure of Ryotsu just now to prove that his character and potential are still quite good. Upon hearing this, Shimo nodded thoughtfully. It turned out to have entered the actual combat stage. Before, Shimo was a student of Kaide Miyano. Although he didn't learn anything from him, he was quite familiar with the teaching process. There are different teaching processes for different students. Starting from the simplest basics of kendo, holding a sword, slashing. It has been maintained until the actual combat stage, fighting in pairs. Miyano Kaide is responsible for finding out the shortcomings of the academy students from the two warring parties and giving new guidance. This kind of teaching method is the most suitable for Shimo. If it is a systematic kendo teaching, it actually makes it feel like a lot of restraint. If this is the case, let's allocate the battle team. With the sound of Shimo's words, the college students soon found their counterparts. Looking at the lonely girl sitting in the front row, Shimo frowned slightly. He looked around, only to find that other people were evasive to her. Come with me to the kendo practice range first. To this, Shimo didn't care too much. After walking out of the classroom and passing through several corridors, everyone came to an empty dojo. Advertisement. Looking at the somewhat familiar scene, Shimo's eyes showed a little nostalgia. When he was in the Spiritual Arts Academy, this kendo practice field was the place where he stayed the longest. After receiving their respective practice wooden swords, the chaotic kendo battle unfolded in the empty dojo. Shimo stood on a high platform, looking down at the battle below. The seemingly splendid kendo duel was like a child's play in his eyes. There are too many shortcomings. Shimo shook his head and couldn't help but worry about the future admissions of Gode 13. As the captain of the 3rd Division, he felt that he should pay something for it. Hey! During the inspection, Shimo suddenly saw the girl before, still standing alone, with a stubborn expression. He walked up to the other person and asked, "Why do other courtyard cows reject you so much?" The girl bit her lower lip and whispered, "They can't beat me." Hearing this, Shimo's expression was taken aback, and he subconsciously spoke. "Can't beat you?" A proud look appeared on the girl's face, like a peacock with an open screen. Shimo came with interest and smiled. "In that case, let me be your sparring opponent. Use your strongest sword to attack." The girl hesitated a little, then hesitated.
I'm very strong, in case I hurt you. Shimo was taken aback and stroked his chin.
Are current college students so confident? Back then, I didn't dare to talk like that, right? Don't worry, if you can hurt me, Shimo believes, I directly recommend you to join Gode 13.
Including the first team, all the Shang teams are up to you to choose.
He still has this little right, however, he is more confident that the other party cannot hurt himself. Perceived, the girl in front of you, Ryotsu, is much better than the surrounding college students.
But compared to him, it's not on the same level at all.
The gap between each other is like fireflies and Hauyue. The girl turned around and prepared to go to the sword stand in the dojo to take a practice wooden sword, but Shimo stopped it.
Just use Zanpakutō directly. Hearing this, a little hesitation appeared on the girl's pretty face.
But I am worried. Shimo waved his hand and believed. My promise is still valid. Don't overestimate yourself and underestimate your opponents. The girl's expression gradually became firmer. Her slender palm touched her Zanpakutō. To be precise, it should be sealed state. Although Zanpakutō's real name is not known, its lethality is far beyond the so-called practice wooden sword. Under Shimo's gaze, the opponent lifted Zanpakutō to shoulder height with great momentum. The college students who noticed this scene also involuntarily stopped their actual combat and began to pay attention to the battle between Shimo and the girl. The fight between the violent woman and Captain Shimo, who do you think will be taller?
Does this still need to be asked? Although the violent woman is powerful, she is definitely not Captain Shimo's opponent.
Mr. Miyano Kaide suffered a lot from her staff before. I think Captain Shimo was also injured.
The kendo level of a violent woman. The college students discussed in low voices, with complex expressions.
Shimo's heart moved, just to give this group of college students a real practical lesson, but it didn't stop them. Kendo IHE cuts the waterflow Choewi slash. The girl flickered, as if she had started Shunpo. Although she was a little strange, she was still extremely fast.
The next moment, the sharp point of the knife came straight to Shimo's throat. Shimo raised his brows slightly, a bit unexpected.
Shi-Ju on the opponent's sword is really unexpected. I thought it was just an ordinary genius, but now it seems that he has the prototype of his own sword intent. Well, it's a good seed. If you have the chance, you can get into the 3rd division.
Seeing that Shimo didn't mean to dodge at all, the girl was a little worried, but it was too late to recruit.
I could only watch Shimo hit his Zanpakutō abruptly. A crisp sound appeared in the front. The girl looked at her in horror. How come the expressions of the other yard cows are not much better? Captain Shimo actually blocked the violent woman's attack with just one finger. Too outrageous. Is this really what shinigami can do? Captain Shimo is still a legendary existence after all. Shock and unbelievable emotions spread among the crowd. Advertisement for the scene before them, they could hardly believe their eyes. If Shimo uses Ryatsu or Kido to offset the girl's attack, they might understand it. However, this only relied on one finger to resist Zanpakutō's slash. It's too ridiculous, beyond the scope of common sense. Nothing is impossible. Shimo whispered, it's better to think about why there is such a cognitive error instead of saying that what is in front of you is impossible. Existence means reasonableness. The girl bit her lower lip, her expression stubborn, and her figure withdrew. When Shunpo was launched again, the Ryatsu contained in Zanpakutō surged several layers. Kendo Thousand Shanglio flowing soul blitz. The chaotic shadow of the sword, flashing in front of the dry time, the light of Ryatsu in the atmosphere, concealed the sight. Under countless sword shadows, only one attack was real. As far as other enemies are concerned, if they make a mistake in their judgment, they are likely to lose their lives. However, in Shimo's eyes, multiple sword shadows have never appeared. There is always only one attack. The familiar collision sound appeared in the ears of the girl seeing the scene in front of her. The girl's face was pale and her eyes showed self-doubt. Won this a moment ago, everyone was shocked by the girl's kendo moves. At the next moment, I couldn't understand what happened in front of me. Shimo's right index finger stretched out and pressed firmly against the girl's Zanpakutō, without even denting the skin. Qian Shanglu's sword moves are not intended to confuse the enemy. The calm explanation sound appeared especially clear in the dojo. Turning all the knife shadows into reality is the true meaning of Qian Shanglio. Slash wherever the sword light hits. Shimo also has some impressions of Qian Shanglu's kendo. But when he reached his level, the use of swordsmanship was of little significance. What should be paid more attention to is Jiani. The powerful sword sound can communicate with the members and speak out as a powerful combat force. Shimo's slashing blade is a good example. Upon hearing this, the girl fell into contemplation. She looked at her Zanpakutō, and the color of enlightenment seemed to flash across her bright eyes. Thank you, Captain Shimo. Shimo nodded, quite relieved. It seems that I still have the talent to be a teacher. Wait, what's the mentality of this old man? He realized that something was wrong and his face was slightly stiff. Ahem, what's your name? Shimo tried to change the subject. The girl smiled like a crescent, holding her Zanpakutō tightly. Qian Wanghao said happily. Rukongai civilian, Qian Guo. When he heard the name, Shimo's expression suddenly froze. Qian Guo, isn't it the condensed mindfulness of the O-Soul? Shimo couldn't be familiar with this name anymore. He looked carefully at the appearance of the girl in front of him. The dark purple hair was tied tightly into a ponytail and hung down. In the light red pupils, there was a look of confusion. A pale white courtyard cow dress is worn on the body, and the waist is gathered with a light red city waist. Although it is somewhat different from the Akane raid in the impression, it is generally the same. Shimo didn't know what to say for a while. Captain Shimo. Qian Guo's puzzled voice interrupted Shimo's thoughts. I want to ask you one thing. Shimo heard this, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and said. Straightforwardly. Qian Guo was silent and seemed to be brewing his emotions. Although I know I have not been able to recite your test. But I want to become a member of the 3rd Division after graduation. So, I want to know where I should work hard. Hearing these words, Shimo was somewhat surprised, but he answered truthfully. Well, keep on sticking to your own path. After you successfully complete the Soul Burial internship, I will wait for you to join you in the 3rd Division. Akane's strength has already touched the level of a team member. After a few more years of practice and learning, joining Gotei 13 will not be difficult. Shimo is still a bit curious about his true identity. Qian Guo, is it really related to that so-called thinking body? Or it's just a coincidence? Chapter 160 Captain Meeting, Hueco Mundo, Conquer the Troops. Advertisement regarding Seping's identity, Shimo decided to investigate after finishing his Kendo teaching. Right now, let's help Miyano Kaide finish the last class. With the end of the battle between the two, as the members of the academy, it is also the first time that they have realized the combat effectiveness of the so-called captain level. With just one finger, he defeated the strongest Kanpei of the 3 rebirths. This strength is enough to shock and yearn for all 3 reincarnations. What I want to say next is about your future path. Shimo glanced over the onlookers, watching them with excitement, and said. If you encounter an opponent that you can't resist on Ryotsu in the future, don't give up, look directly at the opponent and launch the strongest blow. Akane on the side exclaimed excitedly. In this way, can you injure the opponent and create new opportunities for yourself? Shimo said quietly, in this way, you may die with more dignity. Just kidding, a group of college students who haven't graduated yet, do they want to compare with the real Shinigami? Before the real battle of life and death, Shinigami's name would not be given to a college student at will. The crush on Ryotsu has already determined the outcome of the battle. Among them, Aizen is obviously one of the best examples. In the next actual combat class, Shimo did not deliberately favor others. In the face of a cadre of college students, he chose to treat them equally. In Kendo, point out their mistakes and teach them where the real Kendo is. Many people were stunned because of Shimo's advancement, and their Kendo skills improved a lot. At the same time, because of Shimo's guidance, these guys were grateful for him. In the enrollment assessment afterwards, the number of college students who choose the 3rd Division has greatly increased. Of course, these are later things. After finishing the actual combat Kendo class, Shimo returned to the 3rd Division alone. Regarding Seping's identity problem, he decided to leave it to professionals to solve. However, a certain professional brought him a new message. Little Shimo. Shihuan Yoruichi was serious once, the people from the 863 Lidding team just came over. Hear the words. Shimo's eyes flickered and asked. The new Gotei has been ordered. The Lidding team is part of the 5th Squadron of the 2nd Squad's hidden mobile unit. Its duty is to convey the command of the captain to the people appointed by each unit. Because they are far faster than the Hell Butterfly, and the degree of confidentiality is relatively high. So generally speaking, they will be responsible for all orders above the 1st level of stringent order. In addition, the same goes for Gotei Daiming. Shihuan Yoruichi nodded and said solemnly. The intelligence team that went to Hueco Mundo returned with serious damage. However, they also brought back information with sufficient value. The captain meeting will start on time at 8 o'clock in the evening, and the captain and deputy captain of the Gotei 13th Squadron will need to attend. Hearing this, Shimo's heart moved and said, it seems that my proposal has probably been passed. Shihuan Yoruichi's eyes drooped slightly and said, in terms of the specific situation, I have conveyed it to the captains you mentioned. 1. They have no objection to this matter. In addition, the beast Tsuraki Kenpachi once visited the 3rd Division team halfway through. He seems to want to find you. Shimo has a strange expression, and it seems that he already knows the character of this guy very well. We'll discuss the details when we meet. It's getting late now. Let's go directly to the meeting room of the 1st team. Shihuan Yoruichi has no objections. After that, the two turned around and walked outside the 3rd Division team building. The clock in the team house shows the time 7:30. 10 minutes later, Shimo showed up in the meeting room with Shihuan Yi. He looked around somewhat unexpectedly and found that he was the last one to arrive this time.
Everyone, good evening. Shimo's mouth raised slightly. It seems that this meeting is very important.
Shimo-kun. Master Yoruichi. When Shattered Bee saw Shimo, a joyful expression appeared on his face. Bia, however, when Shihuan Yoruichi stepped into the meeting room, his face suddenly became a little weird.
Advertisement. Until now, Broken Bee still can't understand Shihuan Yoruichi's thoughts.
Why do you have to grab Shimo-kun with yourself? Shimo-kun, good night. A gentle and quiet voice came from the crowd.
Shimo looked at it, but saw Egjawali's hands hung slightly, a gentle smile was drawn at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were drawn with beautiful arcs, and he looked at himself quietly.
He walked over and stood up beside him. This is where the captain of the 3rd Division should be.
On the other side, there was Broken Bee with a stubborn expression. Hoo-ha, Shimo. A hoarse and sharp voice came from the opposite side. Shimo slightly fainted his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, there will be your place." A cruel and excited smile appeared on Zaraki Kenpachi's face, and he smiled.
Haha, that's the best. I can no longer control my desire to fight. Kuchiki still has a paralyzed face in front of outsiders, but there is also a little curiosity in his eyes. Shimo, what Shihouen Yoruichi said, is it true? For Shihouen Yoruichi, who once taught her step-by-step techniques, Byakuya Kuchiki couldn't tell how she felt. After all, she violated Soul Society's laws after all. So, Kuchiki would inevitably hesitate when mentioning this name.
Shimo chinned his head and smiled. Nature is true. This captain meeting is related to this matter.
Actually, it's not that Kuchiki couldn't restrain his curiosity. It's Shihouen Yoruichi's information, it's too amazing.
Hearing Shimo's explanation, Kuchiki calmed down and waited quietly for the official start of the meeting.
Kyōraku Shunsui walked around among several people, his eyes flashing with thoughtfulness, but he didn't rush to ask questions. Anyway, the meeting will start right away, and you'll know when you see it. As time passed, Yamamoto Genryusai also appeared in the meeting room.
His majestic gaze swept across it, and when he noticed that the people had arrived, he nodded slightly. Soon, he was sitting upright in the front of the center, behind which stood a deputy captain, Chojiro Sasaki.
Everyone, the things to be discussed in this captain meeting are extremely important. I hope you all put your minds right about the information obtained by the intelligence detective team. The Hueco Mundo matter is imminent. Afterwards, Chojiro Sasaki stepped forward with a serious expression and continued. The intelligence detection team has harvested a piece of vital intelligence at an extremely heavy price. The Manos Grande of the Double Soul Void Hole is constantly being born in Hueco Mundo. Conserving the strength of these Manos Grande is more than 3 times stronger than before. Besides, there is also the emptiness of human form, that is, the existence of the so-called Arankar. Chojiro Sasaki recounted the information obtained by the intelligence investigation team in detail. Among them, nothing more than the emergence of the double virtual holes and an analysis of Arankar's strength. Because Baragan appeared in the world before, the Master of Technology Development Bureau provided some relevant information. In addition, there is also Nilu, who has newly joined the 3rd Division as a representative. Everyone can be regarded as having a general understanding of the strength of Hueco Mundo. After Chojiro Sasaki finished telling the information, there was a brief silence in the meeting room. After a while, a hoarse laughter sounded, ha ha ha. Zaraki Kenpachi looked down at the crowd, like a beast that has been erupting fiercely. So many powerful enemies? It really makes people's blood start to boil. Between the jaws and the opening and closing, a vaguely self-colored steam emerges. Oh, the beast. Kurotsuchi Myuri expresses his disdain. However, his twinkling eyes seem to be deliberately concealing the emotions in his heart. Zaraki Kenpachi ignored Kurotsuchi Myuri's ridicule and immersed himself in his own world. After a short period of research and discussion, Yamamoto Ueninagi Saiwei opened his eyes and said solemnly, "This matter is most likely related to traitors such as Aizen. So, the purpose of this meeting is to select a conquest troop to Hueco Mundo. While investigating the situation, once they encounter Aizen, the follow-up troops will follow immediately." The heavy tone foretells Yamamoto Motoyagi's determination. For Aizen, he definitely puts it first in the eradication target. Advertisement. The other captains fell into contemplation after hearing this. At this moment, Kyōraku Shunsui also suddenly realized. It turns out that Shimo already knew the content of today's meeting, and even reached some kind of agreement with some of the team. You can see a lot from the content of Dabai's words and the subtle changes in his expressions. Wait, why'd I call him Dabai? The broken bee bit his lower lip, and in the gaze looking at Shimo, there was a certain degree of determination, as if he had made a certain determination. As for the others, although there are speculations in their hearts. But when this matter was really placed in front of them, there was a little hesitation. So you guys, do you have any comments? Yamamoto Genryusai returned to his usual posture, his slightly closed eyes swept across the crowd. When he saw Shimo, he paused slightly. Shimo and his gaze captain immediately understood what Yamamoto Genryusai was thinking. At this point, he should have played by himself. Ever since, Shimo took a step forward, staggered from the crowd, and said solemnly, "Captain, I would like to be a member of the expedition team." A few people were puzzled, a few people understood, and a few others showed admiration. And the last one is the representative of the 5th Division and the deputy captain of the 9th Division, Hisagi Shuhei. Shinigami have always admired the strong who have the courage to assume. The degree of danger of the Hueco Mundo trip can already be seen from the information provided by Chojiro Sasaki. The linguistic description alone gives people a sense of suffocation. It's hard to imagine Hisagi Shuhei. If he goes there, he can survive from it. Thinking of this, he shook his head. The probability is very small, almost zero. Yamamoto and Shimo looked at each other, nodded slightly, and said, "Are there other captains?" However, when his voice fell, something unexpected happened. Hisagi Shuhei was slightly startled looking at himself, who took a step back. What's going on? Why, I seem to have stepped back a lot. Wait, it seems that the captains have all taken a step forward. Realizing that something was wrong, Hisagi Shuhei wanted to take a step forward, but suddenly heard Captain Yamamoto speak again. The old man is very pleased with your choice, but as Gode 13, our duty is to guard the palace. So, only 5 captains can join the expedition team. Before the captains could speak, Yamamoto Genryusai continued. The choice is left to Captain Shimo. Hearing this, everyone was stunned for a moment, and at the same time they focused on Shimo. Seeing everyone's reaction, Shimo was also somewhat surprised. He didn't expect this to be the case. In addition to the few people scheduled by default, the other captains also want to participate in this mission. Which even includes Jashiro Yugataki. Isn't it good for your body to stay in Yugantang? Why do you have to go to Hueco Mundo? Shimo suppressed the desire to complain in his heart, adjusted his mind to calm, and said indifferently. The 4th Division Captain Yunohana Retsu, the 6th Division Captain Kuchiki Zia, and the 11th Division Captain Zaraki Kenpachi. At this point, it seems that only the last place is left. Broken Bee's eyes were full of longing. However, Shimo looked at each other, shook his head gently, and said decisively. Captain of the 12th Division, Kurotsuchi Myuri. Among those selected, Zaraki Kenpachi was a little excited. The rest of the people are able to conceal their emotions well. Yamamoto Motonujai's gaze swept across Shimo's chosen captain, and he nodded slightly. The old man agreed. Shimo continued, in addition, we have a batch of reinforcements. When everyone was puzzled, Shimo said their names. This world, Visored, Chapter 161. The plan is determined, stubborn Broken Bee. Advertisement Visored, the Shinigami collective who was forced to get the power of imaginary because of Aizen Kuyusuke's frame. Later, it was judged by Central 46 to deal with it by resolving the illusion, and then rescued by Urahara Kazuki and Shihuin Yoruichi. There are a total of 8 people, including the captains of the first 3 divisions, 5th divisions, 7th divisions and 9th divisions. There are 3 former deputy captains, and 1 Kido vice captain. On the surface, Visored's strength is already quite strong. In fact, when you have a deep understanding, you will find that the strength of this force is indeed quite strong. The deputy captain after Hollow is already comparable to the captain on Shikai. Their biggest shortcoming is just that they cannot be solved. This thing, pay attention to talent and luck. Some can learn to solve in 3 days after hanging on the wall, and some have not learned to solve for more than 10 years. The big gap is just imaginable. Shimo has a deep resentment about this. Visored them Hitsugaya Dashiro pinched his chin with his fingers, and said, in terms of crime, how does Central 46 deal with it? The captains who were once defined as sinners, don't Central 46 have a reasonable explanation? Yamamoto Motoyanagi opened his eyes, took a deep look, and said, Central 46 has already pardoned Visored's crimes and reinstated some of them. Of course, Shinigami, who has been replaced, can choose a position with the same authority. Hitsugaya Dashiro nodded, a sudden color flashed through his turquoise eyes. As the captain for more than 10 years, he is already familiar with some of the rules in Yulingting. The virtues of Central 46 are firmly in mind, although the 46th room of this term has just taken office not long ago. But Hitsugaya Dashiro is confident that they have begun to be blinded by the so-called power, and gradually reduced to machine-like creatures. In response to the death of the 46th chamber of the previous term, the 46th chamber of this term seems to put its own safety in the first place. Can expand the power of Gode 13, they have always spared no effort to support. Regarding the suppression of the rebel Aizen, I even wish to raise his hands and feet in agreement. In a sense, Aizen didn't just do bad things. From the perspective of the captain, at least the current Gode 13 is better than before. Just as Hitsugaya Dashiro was thinking, a determined voice appeared, disrupting his thinking. Captain, I apply to join the Hueco Mundo conquest troop and go to Hueco Mundo to conquer Aizen.
Hitsugaya Toshiro followed the voice, and saw the 2nd Division Captain, Broken Bee, with a firm expression without the slightest sway.
And her gaze is right. Oh, it's Shimo-kun, that's okay. Facing the 4 eyes of the Broken Bee, Shimo feels helpless. The mission of Hueco Mundo to conquer the troops is not to play around.
We are going to Hueco Mundo, a very dangerous place.
Broken Bee fists tightly, so naturally he won't give up his decision just because of a few words. As the captain of the 2nd Division, taking the initiative to fight against the rebels, it's a matter of course.
Omaeda Shigandai looked at his captain nervously, as if cold sweat had slipped from his forehead.
Just now, he suddenly thought, if the captain followed, would he also go to Hueco Mundo, 7? If you go to Hueco Mundo, with your own body and strength, won't you be killed indiscriminately? He was about to persuade his captain, but he was preempted by another person. Kyōraku Shunsui laughed and interrupted, Oh, it seems that our captains are as firm as ever in their responsibilities. Shimo heard the ridicule in this guy's words, and gave him an angry look.
No one will treat you as dumb if you don't speak. Facing the reprimand from his family, Kyōraku Shunsui naturally did not feel half-hearted, and his face was more ridiculous. It's scary, Shimo. It seems that it is time for me as the head of the family to put pressure on you.
Speaking of this, a sly meaning flashed through his deep eyes. Shimo shook his head and cast his gaze on Captain Yamamoto. He is quite clear about the idea of dry crushed bees. However, this trip to Hueco Mundo is not suitable for a captain of her level. Although the analysis may not be objective, the strength level of Broken Bee should be considered the bottom among the captains. Jakuho Raikoben's entire siege weapon, if you choose to go head-to-head, is almost in a half-waste state. A shortcoming that is too heavy and difficult to move is enough to put it in an extremely dangerous situation in battle. Arrancar's ringing is not weaker than Shinigami's Zaobu, and even surpasses it.
The biggest advantage of Shattered Bee is highly mobile and has been abolished in half.
Based on comprehensive considerations, Shimo decided to exclude it from this Hueco Mundo contest. Captain Broken Bee, based on the actual situation. Advertisement Yamamoto Genryusai finally spoke, your ability is more suitable for guarding the inner court.
After considering it for a long time, Hitsugaya Toshiro also decided to fight for it.
Master Captain, before he could finish his words, he saw Emperor Yamamoto lift up his palm. This matter is left to Captain Shimo with full authority. The old man thinks his decision is very reasonable. Hearing that, Hitsugaya Toshiro could only take back the words that had reached his lips miserably. He looked at Shimo unexpectedly, but he was greeted with a stern look. Okay, I'm not going anymore. Hitsugaya Toshiro, smash it, it's kind of helpless. I can't beat and beat, I can only bury some thoughts in my heart. For Aizen's various behaviors, Hitsugaya Toshiro still hates him. Therefore, the idea of joining the Hueco Mundo conquest army was proposed. The team has been decided. Shimo sighed, adjusted his expression, and solemnly said. The remaining captains, the important task of guarding is left to you. Yamamoto Ueninagi nodded slightly, the old and heavy voice echoed in the meeting room. Above, the captain meeting is over. After 3 days, locate Hueco Mundo. The captain meeting ended, Shimo and Shihuan Yoruichi walked out. To his surprise, Broken Bee didn't seem to find himself again. But Shimo also felt that she was not the one who tried to give up. Until, Shihuan Yoruichi beside him gleefully said. Little Shimo, you better be mentally prepared. Smashed Bee, she won't give up easily. Shimo moved his mind and nodded, as if he was mentally prepared. 3 days were enough for the captains to complete the tasks within the squad. The affairs of the 3rd Division are thrown to Kira Izuru again. In this regard, Kira Izuru has no complaints, but looking at him, he seems to want to join the Hueco Mundo crusade. However, he was concerned about his own strength. Kira Izuru temporarily pressed this idea to the bottom of my heart. On the 2nd day after the captain meeting ended, Shimo was going to the Technology Development Bureau to inquire about the structure of the directional black cavity. Kurotsuchi Myuri is a capricious person, since Shimo will go to Hueco Mundo and tell him about the conquest. This guy just forgot all the unhappiness before. In his opinion, as long as scientific research can be conducted, anything is fine. Especially after the appearance of things like the twin soul void hole, he was full of yearning for the changes in Hueco Mundo. However, Shimo is still wary of this guy. Crazy or something is the most difficult to control. Fortunately, this guy's blood is thick enough to be a cannon fodder. On the streets of Lingting, Shimo walked steadily in the direction of the 12th Division, subconsciously thinking about the black cavity. However, at this moment, the surrounding changes of Ryotsu attracted Shimo's attention. He raised his head and looked around. It should have been a bright day, but the surrounding environment was directly shrouded in darkness. The spreading shadow, like a living thing, swallows all the light. Seeing this scene, Shimo remembered Toussaint Konami's explanation. Suzumushi's final Yanma cricket. The difference is that the current change is not as powerful as its solution. The shrouded darkness is only a reduction in ordinary visibility. Chatter. The sound of Zanpakutō's scabbard came from behind Shimo. Seeking flowers feeling the fluctuation of Ryotsu, a look of helplessness appeared on his face. Isn't it stubborn to be less stubborn? Shimo turned around, just in time to meet Broken Bee's black eyes. No, I want to prove my strength. Advertisement. This is the artifact passed down by the bee family, the Knight of the Bee Curtain. The Broken Bee bit her lower lip tightly with a stubborn look, and Shimo's eyesight could vaguely see the change in his expression. The Knight of the Bee Curtain can draw people into the dark environment, so that the assassination skills passed down by the bee family get a great bonus. I saw a little cold light in front of the Broken Bee. Kill the enemy, Suzumaki. The tone of cold test from his mouth. In the next moment, his petite figure gradually melted into the darkness. Attached to the small blade that I saw, hitting Shimo's fingertips, it made a sound like gold and iron. Shattered Bee's heart was shocked, and he violated the assassination regulations for a while. If you miss a hit, you'll get rid of it. There was a brief hesitation, but what he expected did not happen. The secret footwork was activated, and the figure of the Broken Bee disappeared again. However, above Shimo's eyes, it was suddenly as bright as a star. The ability of the spirit barrier has already been activated. The so-called dark environment created by the Night of the Bee has no effect on it at all. This play chapter, although it is called an artifact, but in the final analysis it is nothing more than a spiritual tool. It's just that the effect of this psychic tool is far beyond that of the conventional psychic tool. Here is the so-called artifact. Shihuan's Tianzan stepping, bandages and a series of artifacts are the same. At this moment, the broken bee is hiding behind a stone pillar less than 3 meters away from Shimo. The effect of the Night of the Bee curtain is just to let the darkness envelop the environment. It affects vision, but also affects Ryatsu's perception. Unfortunately, the effect is not great. The shattered bee's body flickers, assassinating skills. Even in a daytime environment, it is difficult to find the trajectory of its actions. Unfortunately, these techniques are not very useful for Shimo. Ding! The same sound, the same location. Suzumaki hit Shimo's fingertips again, overlapping the bee-patterned mark, and appeared on his fingertips like a black tattoo. The light of Ryatsu bloomed on it, as if it was about to explode. Seeing this, Broken Bee retracted his arm in a hurry. Here in her opinion, Shimo is likely to be injured. The effect of a 2-hit kill is not effective for people who are much higher than Ryatsu. However, it can still be done to get injured. She folded Shimo's fingers in her palm in a panic, trying to use her Ryatsu to relieve the effect of the bee pattern. Shimo sighed softly when he saw this, and Ryatsu mobilized it to the fullest. In an instant, the effect of the bee pattern was completely eliminated. Broken Bee's expression was taken aback, trying to coldly show his expression again and continue to attack. However, Shimo touched his hands with his backhand. Okay, let's stop here. I know you really want to follow us to Hueco Mundo, but for your safety, one. Shimo sighed and explained, I can't let you go with you. The Broken Bee's eyes were low and lost. Am I really not able to help you at all? Shimo was about to speak, but he heard Broken Bee continue to say. I don't have the strength of Yoruichi-sama, and I'm not as gentle as Captain Unohana. I just want to help you. Her voice became smaller and smaller, her expression lost ultimate. Shimo stretched out his palm, stroked his soft black hair, embraced him in his arms, and comforted. Since you think so, then I will ask you one thing. Broken Bee raised his head, with a little hope in his eyes. There is a girl named Akane in the current 3 generations of the Ziyang Spiritual Academy. Shimo slowly said, she is likely to be involved in a conspiracy that threatens Soul Society. I beg you to investigate her identity, Smashed Bee. The gentle tone, flowing in the heart of Broken Bee, washed away the residual stubbornness. The Broken Bee lightly chins his head, and Wei Shui's face has become the most beautiful scene in the night. 0. Chapter 162 Targeting the Black Cavity, Hueco Mundo, will make peace. Advertisement. Finally, it was fooled by the Broken Bee. Seeing his leaving back, Shimo rubbed his brow vigorously. Let's hurry up and find Kurotsuchi Myuri. At the next moment, his figure flickered, thinking about staying in place. In the case of high-speed pacing, he soon arrived in the Technology Development Bureau. Shimo, who came here again, noticed a special character. The two-tone hair with bright golden and green is very difficult to be ignored if you want people to ignore it. The 7th seat of the 12th division, is it because of the mouth and the shadow of the wolf? Shimo thought slightly, recalling many things in his heart. Another person who needs attention, but right now, Shimo didn't deliberately take it to heart. Because there are still more important things to do. Seeing Shimo again, Kurotsuchi Myuri is as usual. He didn't seem to care about what happened in the past. Has the stability of the inner cavity been determined? Shimo looked around in the research room and did not seem to find similar equipment. Kurotsuchi Myuri flicked his nails, tapped on his temples, making a thumping sound, as if it was empty inside. There was a little problem. Although the intelligence team gave accurate coordinates, it seems that the coordinates have been interfered by Ryatsu. In the case of unable to locate, we are likely to be randomly teleported when entering Hueco Mundo. Shimo frowned slightly, as a being with spatial ability. He knows exactly what the consequences of random teleportation are. If you can reach Hueco Mundo accurately, it would be a little better. But August 6-7, as once disturbed by Lingza turbulence, it is very likely to be transmitted to unknown places. The danger has also become unknown. Jin Shin may be teleported into Lingza turbulence. Throw away the coordinates provided by the intelligence team. Shimo, as the person in charge of the Hueco Mundo expedition force, directly decided. Located near the Manos Grande forest. Last time I came back from Hueco Mundo, the 4th division should provide you with the coordinates, right? Kurotsuchi Myuri raised his head and crossed his arms in a strange posture. It seems there really is. Immediately, he sat on the swivel chair and scrolled to the front of the keyboard. The smooth beating is scattered among them, as if playing music. Found it. Nemoli shouted, I will try the black tone. He pressed a dark green button, and then a strange Ryatsu wave appeared in front of the laboratory. Shimo looked on the screen. Somewhere in the training ground of the 12th division, there was a strange spatial change. The cube-shaped space fragments fell, revealing the dark and deep black cavity door. Successful.
Kurotsuchi Myuri grinned to ultimate, and his smile was exaggerated.
The training ground number 9 has a Ryotsu oppression simulation comparable to the captain's level. The gate of Heichang is not only positioned to the coordinates, but also Ryotsu who can withstand multiple captains. Of course, there is no way to fight in a black tone. He added in time. Shimo nodded. As for Kurotsuchi Myuri's scientific research level, he is quite full of chapters. Perhaps because of the contact with myself, Kurotsuchi Myuri at this time, research in space, is no worse than Urahara Kazuki too much. In fact, he can also open the black chamber through spells. But with such a useful tool as Kurotsuchi Myuri, why should it be left unused? What's more, Kurotsuchi Myuri did not reject this matter at all. On the contrary, he was extremely excited. New test product. Kurotsuchi Myuri stared at the door of the black cavity on the screen with a crazy smile. It's so yearning.
3 days passed quickly. Hueco Mundo. Conquest troops. In the early morning, when the morning sun is rising, they gathered in the court of the first team building.
Shimo looked around to determine the number of people. The 4th Division Unohana Retsu, as for Katetsu Izan due to combat effectiveness issues, was left behind in the 4th Division team building. During the time Unohana Retsu was away, I was responsible for all the problems in the comprehensive ambulance. In the 6th Division, Kuchiki Zia and Aburai Renji. The 11th Division, Zaraki Kenpachi and Kusajishi Yachiru, the latter's combat effectiveness can be ignored for the time being. The 12th Division, Kurotsuchi Myuri and Ni and Meng. Shimo stayed on them for a while. His expression was a bit weird. A slight perception is to perceive Kurotsuchi Myuri's abnormality. The complicated Ryotsu is mixed in its body, like a pot of hodgepodge. Advertisement thinking of Kurotsuchi Myuri's transformation of his body, Shimo inevitably feels a bit cold. It seems that Kurotsuchi Myuri has already taken out all his wealth in order to capture the new test product. In addition, Ryotsu of Niameng seems to be somewhat abnormal. I can't fit my body, look for Nirvana, Shimo secretly said in his heart, and the cold came out from the bottom of his heart. For this pair of father and daughter, he stayed away. Yamamoto Genryusai watched the crowd, tapped his cane, making a sound, and said, Captain Nirvana, leading to the directional black voice of Hueco Mundo, you should be ready, right? Kurotsuchi Myuri's mouth is wide open, and his face is sullen. Has been successful, however, there was a problem with the coordinates provided by the intelligence team. At the suggestion of Captain Shimo, I changed the coordinates to near Meino's Grande Forest. Upon hearing this name, Zaraki Kenpachi responded. Meino's Grande Forest, where Asido stayed before. Before anyone else could answer, Kusajishi Yachiru, who was sitting on his shoulder, said excitedly. Yes, Shaojian, your memory is much better than before. Zaraki Kenpachi's face was slightly gloomy, and he said angrily. Shudder, 8,000 streams. You have too much nonsense. Yamamoto Genryusai pondered for a moment, then said. Since it was the suggestion of Captain Shimo, the old man will not interfere more. Then, the 1st, Hueco Mundo, Expedition Force. Led by Captain Shimo of the 3rd Division, the 4 captains coordinated and led the 4 deputy captains to go together. The voice fell, and the cane in his hand hit the ground hard. Boom. As the heavy sound fell, Kurotsuchi Myuri chanted a spell to open the black chamber, and the weird voice echoed in the court. In my right hand, I put the stone of the border of communication, and with my left hand, I grip the chair of the black-haired shepherd's neck with the sword of reality. Colorful clouds come together, my generation is hunting ibis. Black chamber, turn it on. As his voice fell, Kurotsuchi Myuri's special psychic equipment, which was like a flashlight, suddenly released light and shone on the open space in front of him. Shimo saw this scene and wiped away the cold sweat that didn't exist. It's still a flashlight, the light shines, and the black cavity is officially opened. The deep darkness gives people a sense of horror. Shimo stepped forward, the first one to come to the door of the black cavity. Sister Yoruichi, Nilu, let's go ahead. Shihuan Yoruichi and Niluichi nodded together and followed Shimo. The 3 of them stepped into the black tone together. The remaining few people also kept up with Shimo's pace. Silent atmosphere, surrounded by the atrium of the first team. Regarding this, Hueco Mundo, conquest, others still have some concerns. After all, there's the virtual base camp, Hueco Mundo. Since the sand flew up, the rolling dead branches and gravel made a noise in the sand. The huge rock, under the wind of Hueco Mundo, has dust and sand falling from time to time. Some small animals are vacant, digging under the sand, seeming to be looking for food or something. However, in an instant, these little guys seemed to have noticed something. Their limbs moved frantically and fled towards the distance. Within a few breaths, within a radius of tens of meters, there will no longer be the slightest resemblance to Ryotsu. The next moment, from the air above the sand, the concentration of Lingza suddenly increased. Then, the space tore apart, and darkness emerged in it. Shimo and others walked out of it slowly. As a leader-level powerhouse, just the Ryotsu that unconsciously emits is enough to clear the weak and small void around here. It's more desolate than I thought. Shihuan Yoruichi's voice sounded behind Shimo. It seems that the coordinates are a little off. Shimo let out Ryatsu's perception, searching for the location of Meino's Grande Forest. The real Meino's Grande Forest should have to walk 10 kilometers forward. Kurotsuchi Myuri's directional black cavity is not accurate enough. What about the group of visored? Kurotsuchi Myuri can't wait to see the shinigami who have virtual power. Not in a hurry. Shimo let out a sigh of relief, his voice flat, and said, "Before meeting with them, I need to emphasize one thing. Advertisement, this operation must follow my command. If there are violators, don't blame me for being rude." What he said was clearly addressed to Kurotsuchi Myuri and Zaraki Kenpachi. The others, don't deliberately violate Shimo's ideas. These two guys alone are the most unstable elements in the team. Hey, got it. Kurotsuchi Myuri let out a weird laugh. Hurry up and give orders, Captain Shimo. Are we going to fight now, or to meet the so-called visored? Zaraki Kenpachi made a disdainful voice, but he did not refute what Shimo said. Glances over the two of them, Shimo opened his mouth and said, "Go to the coordinate position agreed before to check it." Everyone nodded. There was no objection to this, because Visored did not return to Soul Society, but went to Hueco Mundo, by means of Urahara Kazuki. The two forces, through Shimo's transmission, determined two very close coordinates. If it weren't for Kurotsuchi Myuri's directional black cavity, there was a little problem. It is estimated that they have reconciled with Visored. The distance of 10 kilometers is not far away for everyone. When heading to the agreed coordinates, Shimo also noticed the color of memories in Nilou's eyes. As the former third Espada, Nilou's lifetime in Hueco Mundo far exceeds that of the present world in the spiritual court. This place left her too many memories. Suddenly returning here, it is inevitable to fall into a special mood. "Nilou," Shimo said suddenly. Hearing his voice, Nilou smiled and looked at her hand. "Well, I am here, Shimo." Upon seeing this, Shimo smiled slightly and said, "I will always be by your side." Hearing this, Nilou couldn't help but brighten up and replied. Nilou too. Through his comfort, Nilou's melancholy mentality disappeared in an instant. Soon, they rushed to the agreed position. To Shimo's surprise, Visored and others had already waited here. However, they did not dispatch the entire army, only 4 people came. Hirako Shinji, Muguruma Kensai, Yopomaru Lisa and Love Akawa. Visored's 4 captains in total, 3 came. Shimo is quite satisfied with this. Hirako Shinji, as usual, wears a shirt and costume that appears in the world. His mouth is grinning, and his fine teeth are tightly pressed together, showing an extremely weird smile. "Oh, everyone, it's been a long time." He is not like Sarugaki Hiyori, who hates shinigami. On the contrary, he is still able to accept these former colleagues. "It's been a long time indeed." Eggflower Lie said gently, "I am very pleased to see that you are still alive. My colleagues from more than 200 years ago appeared in front of me again, causing a slight change in his mind. However, Yunohana Retsu's ability to adjust his mentality is still very strong, and he soon returned to peace." A respectful look appeared on Hirako Shinji's face, and he bowed his head in motion. Captain Ujiwa is the same as before. Hirako Shinji still knows a little bit about this highly qualified captain of the 4th Division. So, in front of her, Hirako Shinji put away the posture of laughing. "It seems that Kazuki's directional black voice is much better than Kurotsuchi Myuri's yours." Shimo noticed the Ryatsu fluctuations around and realized that Visored and others had just arrived. Hearing this, Kurotsuchi Myuri's face is rarely annoyed and angry. That damn it guy. Hirako Shinji also looked at Shimo. He couldn't help but think of the battles that took place in the present base before. It's unavoidable toothache. The power that Shimo demonstrated is their greatest confidence in their appearance in Hueco Mundo, this time. Thinking of this, the weird smile appeared on Hirako Shinji's face again. "Captain Shimo, next, what should we do?" Chapter 163. Moving forward, Espada meeting. Advertisement. Facing Hirako Shinji's question, Shimo gave an answer after thinking a little bit. "Toward the place where the souls are most densely packed. In the records of Soul Society, Hueco Mundo is divided into the main circle and the inner circle, and even the Suya Palace is just a brief introduction, and there is no more information." However, in Shimo's cognition, Hueco Mundo is far more fertile than Soul Society's records. Right now, their position should be on the edge of the inner circle. The forest of Meino's Grande seems to be under the feet of everyone. For Jillian and Ajuka's among them, Shimo doesn't want to bother if it's not necessary. It doesn't matter whether he is strong or not, anyway, he is not as strong as him. There are too many, and it is almost impossible to deal with it in a while. "The purpose of our trip is Aizen Shuyusuke," Shimo said lightly. According to the information of the master, he can mobilize Meino's Grande and Arankar. Declaring his identity, he must be in a very high existence in Hueco Mundo. And the strong should enjoy the most excellent resources. He looked east, his eyes burning. There, it belongs to the place where the concentration of spirits is the most dense. As early as the last time he came to Soul Society, Shimo had already determined the location of the Shuyi Palace. Although Nixia is also T on this, but some words, it is better to tell through him. After all, to some extent, Nilu's identity was somewhat embarrassing among the crowd. But she didn't care about it herself. For Nilu, as long as she can be with Shimo, that's enough. Everyone had no opinion on Shimo's words. If this is the case, then let's proceed according to Shimo-kun's words. Eggflower Lai smiled softly. The captain-level existence set foot on Hueco Mundo. Things. I think it should not be hidden from Aizen. If you don't go outside, at this 14 moments, our whereabouts should have fallen into his eyes. Hearing that, Vizard's expression suddenly stiffened. At the same time, in Suya Palace, construct an extremely large and complex maze like Suya Palace with countless inner halls. Apart from the respective palaces of Arrancar or Espada, there are countless other palaces with various functions. At this moment, Aizen is sitting on top of an inner sanctuary. The tall dark blue throne seems to be carved from a special material. Aizen turned his head slightly, holding his right hand vacantly, resting his chin, and looking at the huge light curtain in front of him with interest. On the huge light curtain, several pictures continuously flickered on it. Until someone in the picture raises his head, he seems to be aware of something. Immediately, the screen went black and observation was impossible. At this time, under the throne, a person came slowly, and his feet made a slight noise. Aizen retracted his gaze from above the light curtain and fell below. Ya cough. Is Aizen-sama so concerned about these guys in Soul Society? Ichimaru Jin's eyes become a warped arc, and he is dressed in a wide haori. Zanpakutō and his hands are covered by haori. The whole person exudes an extremely dangerous aura.
Yin, your idea is wrong. The people of Soul Society are not worthy of my attention. Aizen's fingers on the armrest of the throne, tapping slightly, making a sound. Only Shimo-kun is qualified to be followed by me. The rest, she is just. Hearing that, Ichimaru Jin showed a fox-like smile with a huge arc of mouth. Saw, as I expected. 1. Captain Shimo, it is indeed a very difficult object. Aizen stared at him and chuckled lightly. The power of Shimo-kun is close to the critical limit. It deserves to be taken seriously. Upon hearing this, Ichimaru Jin's expression was slightly solemn, and his smile eased a lot. As that incredible creature used to deal with Captain Shimo.
Aizen's jaw dropped, his eyes drooping, and his pretentious attitude was revealed. Silver, your focus should not be on Manticore. Go ahead and inform Espada to hold a meeting. He placed his hands on the guards on both sides, looking down at Ichimaru Jin below, and said indifferently. We need to confirm next, about invading Karakura town and meeting the Soul Society captains. Ichimaru Jin lowered his head and motioned. Follow your will, Lord Aizen. After all, he left the inner temple here advertisement. Aizen looked at his leaving back, his eyes deep, and he couldn't see the slightest change in his expression. At this moment, in the center of his chest, a blue and purple light flickered, like the light of creation. After a while, the main hall of the Suya Palace was filled with 10 Arrancars wearing white uniforms with different looks. They sit where they should sit according to their serial numbers. Behind him is a hard and tall stone chair. First Espada, Coyote Stark, Pack of Wolves. Second Espada, Zael Aporo Glands, Evil Concubine. Third Espada, Tia Halibal, Queen of the Queen. Fourth Espada, Ulquiorra Cipher, Black Wing Demon. Fifth Espada, Grimjow Yaka Jack, Leopard King. Sixth Espada, Zamari. Lulu, Curse Eye Sanga. Seventh Espada, Araniero Ururueri. Eighth Espada, Rubian Tenor, Bird Girl. Ninth Espada, Yami Largo, Angry Beast. 10th Espada, Ferdinand Manticore, Sasori Lion. The rearrangement position makes the Arrancars a little confused. Hey, when I saw the second Espada, it was occupied by Zael Aporo. Grimjow made a puzzled voice, disdainfully asked. You fellow, what right do you have to sit there? Could it be that you are stronger than me? Hearing his words, Zael Aporo turned his head, his eyes under the glasses mask seemed to be full of evil. Saw, it looks like our little leopard. I am very dissatisfied with the arrangement of Espada's serial numbers this time. The provocative words made Grimjow's violent temper naturally unbearable. Just as it was about to attack, a voice came to an abrupt halt. Grimjow, do you have any questions about my arrangement? When Akuma heard this voice, Grimjow's body suddenly stiffened, as if in the extreme cold of winter, chill was climbing on his spine. A terrible sense of oppression came, so that he could not even look directly at the master of the voice. Grimjow has a stubborn expression, clenches his teeth tightly, and the words barely squeeze out between the teeth. No, no. As the voice fell, the sense of oppression disappeared. Aizen walked slowly to the throne on the top of the conference table, and said lightly. That's the best. He looked around at Espada Arrancar, who was sitting around the conference table, with a light look. Your cultivation time is over. The captains of the Soul Society have formally invaded Hueco Mundo, and are constantly approaching the Palace of the Night. As the voice fell, the expressions of the Arrancars changed to different degrees. Aizen's eyes drooped slightly, sweeping across everyone, and continued. Our goal is still the present Karakura town. But now, I need to deal with the immediate trouble.
Listening to Aizen's narration, the Arankars are still quiet, and they don't seem to overreact. The only thing a little special is Grimmjow. He is keen to enjoy all kinds of battles, and can't wait to participate in the next battles. Your response is very good. Aizen faintly praised, his gaze wandered to the end of the conference table, and said.
Before the Espada meeting starts, let's take a look at a video.
Silver, leave it to you. As his voice fell, a white figure walked out from the shadows. Yes, Lord Aizen. Ichimaru Jin took out the video playback equipment from the place hidden by the sleeves. After a short operation, the screen suddenly hovered over the conference table.
Considering the different locations of Espada, the picture looks a bit weird.
But with their position, they just happened to be able to see them completely.
The Arankars looked up and saw a total of 14 people walking on top of the sand on the screen.
4 of them wore Haori, Captain Joseki, 6 wore Death Tyrant costumes, and 4 wore worldly costumes. A group of people looks a bit weird. When Ulquiorra and Yami noticed Shimo on the screen, their pupils shrank. This guy. Yami's teeth clenched and made a sour crunch. On his arm, the blue veins violently entangled like a dragon, giving people a strong sense of strength. Both of them have been killed by Shimo, and they are naturally very impressed. They are all very good experimental materials. Advertisement. Zael Aporo crossed his fingers, eyes full of desire. Except for the few headed, the others are all rubbish. Grimmjow expressed his opinion. Aizen's expression remained unchanged, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and he said faintly. Everyone, please don't underestimate them, especially the one who walks in the front. His words are not finished yet. Shimo on the screen seems to have noticed something, looking in the direction of surveillance. With a dangerous smile on his face, the picture suddenly fluctuated and disappeared in the next moment. Sorry, Lord Aizen. Ichimaru Jin's tone was a bit distressed, the only pictures I have kept before are these. Aizen took the lead, with a deep gaze, and said. These are enough. Everyone, do you have any suggestions? The cold sweat, sliding down Yami's head, wandering around his dark skin, seemed particularly eye-catching. At the moment Shimo's gaze came over, he seemed to recall an unstoppable slash. The seeds of fear are constantly germinating in his heart. Tisk, it seems that I need more adequate preparation. Zael Aporo gave a weird smile, and at the same time looked at Ulquiorra with a very provocative look. The two Espadas acted together, and they were killed by somebody. After all, it's too weak. The voice fell, and before Ulquiorra could speak 867, Aronio on the side spoke. Master Aizen has already said, please don't underestimate the other person. Hearing that, Zael Aporo twisted his head and looked at Aronio from a strange angle. Inferior imaginary, do you have the qualifications to speak here? The sound of the negative test makes the whole meeting room full of cold feeling. At this moment, Aizen opened his mouth and said, everyone, stay calm and restless. Now, I will arrange your actions for you. The first 3 Espada went to this world with me, and took charge of suppressing Karakura town. Hearing Aizen's voice, Zael Aporo calmed down suddenly and bowed his head. Follow your wishes, Master Aizen. Stark looked up, his eyes were lifeless and unmotivated. Yes. Hulabel's eyes flickered slightly, and then he firmly said, yes, Master Aizen. Aizen continued to look at the remaining people, patrolling his eyes. You guys from the 4th to 10th Espada, intercept the characters who invaded Shinigami, and leave it to you. In addition, the head of Shinigami is named Kyōraku Shimo. He is the one who killed Ulquiorra and Yami. He deserves your first priority in strength. However, his opponent will be Manticore. As the voice fell, Espadas couldn't help but focus on this new Espada. Facing the gaze of his colleagues, Ferdinand Manticore's face was calm, unchanged. He is of medium build, and his mask is tied around his mouth and nose like a zipper. After hearing Aizen's words, Manticore didn't speak, but just nodded. From beginning to end, the new colleague never said a word. This inevitably makes everyone confused, but also a little more vigilant. As for the guards of the Zai Palace, Aizen tapped his fingers on the armrest of the seat, making a slight noise. Just leave it to your soul-separated souls. Have you seen it? After all, his indifferent eyes swept across everyone. Espada, who was touched by the eyes, had his head slightly lowered, avoiding looking at him. In that case, please go ahead. Seeing this, Aizen smiled slightly and stood up. Although they can't be small, you don't need to care too much. You only need to fight as usual. No need to worry, no need to worry. Because whatever happens, just follow my footsteps. We are invincible ahead of us. Chapter 164 The Roaring Thunder Cannon, Head On.
Advertisement at this time, in the inner circle of Hueco Mundo, white sandflies, making whirring sounds. Shimo and his party are still marching towards Suya Palace. When the sense of being peeped appeared around Shimo on the road, he could already tell. On the side of Shuyi Palace, they definitely discovered their existence. In this regard, Shimo told everyone about his discovery. And their unanimous opinion is to accelerate the progress. However, considering the consumption of Ryotsu, everyone's speed can only be maintained at a constant value. If you deliberately launch the high-speed Shunpo, go to the Shuyi Palace. Inevitably consume a large part of Ryotsu. In this way, after encountering an enemy, it is very likely that Ryotsu will be overconsumed, leading to a defeat in the battle. Considering being in the inner circle of Hueco Mundo, everyone's mind is still more cautious. Shimo didn't have any comments on this either. Although his existing strength is very strong, so strong that he can't even determine what he is doing. But Shimo never looked down upon Aizen at all. There seems to be a virtual group in front. Nilou followed Shimo, twitching her Chong nose and slightly pursing her eyebrows. She didn't use Ryotsu's perception method for virtual induction. When Nilou was injured before, she had to be cautious all the time. Otherwise, it is possible to be attacked by the imaginary. For this reason, it has exercised a special ability to sense virtual existence. And, named it the ability to avoid natural enemies. Although there is no need to worry about those things anymore, but the ability is still preserved. Nilou can now be far, far away, is able to find virtual movement. Shimo nodded, and didn't have any doubts about Nilou's words. Because on the way here, I have already encountered several waves of virtual groups. Large or small, it looks aggressive, clamoring to swallow them in. However, Muguruma Kensai, Asero, destroyed more than 99% of it. Although it is a unit of measurement, the strength of Boxing West is still worthy of recognition. After all, he can top 6 cars. After Nilou's words, how long hasn't passed yet? In front of everyone, there's the dust and sand. A large wave of weird shapes rushed towards everyone. It is more mighty than the previous scene. Muguruma Kensai walked out of the crowd again, Chiantang spread out, his 5 fingers changed slightly, and a red materialized Ryotsu continued to marry him. Boom! The next moment, the roaring Sero penetrated the virtual group, leaving a deep gully on the ground. Countless emptiness was instantly transformed into Hueco Mundo. However, the emptiness he eliminated was only a very small part of the imaginary group this time. Come. Muguruma Kensai's face is very ugly, the number of virtual groups is too large. Shimo walked to him and said calmly, "Leave it to me." As he said, he stretched out his hand, his 5 fingers were straight, and an indifferent voice sounded in Muguruma Kensai's ear. The 88 of Hado. Flying dragon strikes thieves and shakes the sky and thunder cannon. In an instant, a large amount of dark blue Ryotsu gathered in front of Shimo's palm. In the next moment, a huge blue beam of light that was several times wider than Muguruma Kensai's Sero lost from Shimo's heart. The roar of thunder, roar in Hueco Mundo. At the forefront of the virtual group, the spine's greedy expression solidified, and before they could be transformed into a panic color, they were swallowed by a huge blue light beam. The terrifying Lei Wen leapt into the virtual group like a punishment. The roar of the thunder cannon covers dozens of kilometers. Muguruma Kensai finally discovered to his horror that the real gap between him and Shimo lay. There is no more doubt about the original defeat. Sero, who worked hard by himself, was nothing more than killing a very small part of the Zuchun. However, Shimo, who only released Hado on the 88 one time, wiped out the entire virtual group. The sudden increase in the concentration of Lingza in the surrounding environment has already explained everything. On the sandy surface in front, a huge ravine like a canyon appeared, giving people a great shock. Not only Muguruma Kensai, the others were shocked and Shimo's strength was revealed. Their cognition of Shimo's strength still stays in the battle in the original world. Advertisement on the hill of Shuangting, Shimo is extremely strong though. However, because of the characteristics of space capabilities, it is not 1/10 of the magnitude of the current cause. A flying dragon smashes thieves and shakes the sky, completely refreshing their understanding of Shimo's strength. Among them, Aburai Renji watched the scene in front of him, opening his mouth unconsciously, almost unable to believe his eyes. Is this really what Shinigami should have? Too, he subconsciously opened up the intercession. Byakuya Kuchiki on the side glanced at him lightly and said, "When did you have the illusion that Shimo is a normal Shinigami?" Aburai Renji was tolerated by his captain, and he was speechless for a while, not knowing how to answer. Yeah, is there any normal Shinigami who can achieve such strength? Perhaps Captain Yamamoto can also cause such damage, but the age of Captain Yamamoto has been thousands of years. The time of his existence is even comparable to the history of the entire Yulingting. All monsters. Aburai Renji murmured, he has completely abandoned the idea of chasing Shimo. Those who are defeated by me, even if I give you time to catch up, will gradually become invisible. What Shimo said at the time has been completely fulfilled at this moment. It's not just him, other people too. Only Nilou, who has always believed in Shimo, did not have similar emotions. It's just that other people can control their emotions well, and they don't yell like Aburai Jechi. Ahead, on Shimo's outstretched palm, white smoke faintly rises. He lightly waved his hand to remove the white smoke. The virtual group is resolved. Go ahead. Shimo's face didn't change at all, as if what he did just now was not what he did. Facing the ravine like a canyon, everyone decisively chose to bypass. This scene is too dry and exciting. As he approached the Suya Palace, Shimo suddenly stopped and said, "There is one thing, I need to remind you. everyone focused their eyes on him. Just when we stepped into Hueco Mundo, Aizen and the others should have found us. As the voice fell, everyone's hearts suddenly contracted. Their expressions were shocked, and the four Vizard's reactions were particularly strong. What? Aizen and they already know that we have come to Hueco Mundo. Shimo nodded, his expression still indifferent, and said, before the first encounter with the virtual group attack, we should have entered Aizen's surveillance range. Kurotsuchi Myuri let out a weird laugh, and said, it seems that Captain Shimo deliberately didn't tell us. Hearing this, Shimo's eyes became a little cold, staring at Kurotsuchi Myuri. You have your surveillance equipment near the Technology Development Bureau, right? With Aizen's level of caution, how can he not care about the surroundings of his base camp? As long as we head towards the Suya Palace, they will inevitably be discovered by them. This is inevitable. Shimo's words left Kurotsuchi Myuri speechless for a while. As for the surveillance equipment near the Technology Development Bureau, he is indeed prepared. But what makes him puzzled is how did Shishi discover these?
Regarding Kurotsuchi Mayuri's question, Shimo certainly would not answer that he had forgotten.
In this way, it is too detrimental to his image. As for the so-called sense of surveillance, Shimo merely covered the extreme Ryotsu, which completely destroyed Aizen's surveillance.
The reason why I say this, Shimo continued, I want to tell you that it's impossible to make a surprise attack.
It's okay to fight head-on. In addition, you all know about the twin soul void hole before. So, you must be mentally prepared for the tragic situation that is about to emerge. Hearing that, a weird smile appeared on Hiriko Shinji's face, and his exposed teeth reflected self-light under the sunlight, making it even more weird. Before we came to Hueco Mundo, we had already set aside life and death. So, Mr. Shimo can rest assured. Shimo actually looked at the four fake soldiers from the field, but found that they were all arrogant. There is no sense of vertical squareness. In that case, go ahead. Advertisement. Everyone was speechless, but the atmosphere in the team was much heavier than before. After another tens of kilometers, the Suya Palace was still out of reach, but Nilu suddenly stopped. Shimo. Hearing this, Shimo turned his head and looked at her. I saw Nilu's expression become a bit heavy and said solemnly, I smell a familiar smell. When his words fell, Shimo raised his brows slightly, and within the range of his Ryotsu perception, a very large and evil group of Ryotsu appeared. Not one, but a group, everyone, ready to fight. Shimo reminds you, take a few steps forward, waiting for the upcoming Arrancar Espada. Hearing his words, everyone increased their vigilance, and several deputy captains subconsciously pulled out their own Zanpakutō.
1 2 3 4. Shimo analyzed the incoming Reiatsu, 9 Espadas, Aizen really looks up to us.
He sighed, but it caused everyone's hearts to suddenly rise to their throats, and their expressions changed in shock. 9 Captain Arrancar? Yamaru Lisa could not help but exclaimed, unbelievable.
At the next moment, Yunohana Retsu's face was slightly serious and reminded.
Shimo-kun, I think we should notify the first Ling Court of reinforcements. Shimo's slightly eyebrows, I feel that the incoming Ryotsu is a bit special. Reinforcements may be difficult to reach. When they heard this, they were puzzled. If we don't go outside, we will see the same faces appearing in front of us. As these Arrancar's Ryotsu approached, Shimo finally confirmed Urahara Kazuki's guess, and at the same time was surprised at Aizen's execution in his heart. There is such a short time. It was the transformation of Arrancar Espada into this way. It should be said, is it really Aizen? 19 powerful Ryotsu descended, and a terrifying sense of oppression, all acting on the Hueco Mundo conquest troops. The slightly weaker deputy team-level people, their expressions became a bit sullen for a while. It wasn't until the captains released their own Ryotsu to offset the Ryotsu of the Espadas, and their expressions were relieved a lot. Ulquiorra, Grimjow, Zamari, Arenillo, Ruby, Yacha. There is another Espada that seems to be sealed by Qianwang Zhao, Zipper. I don't know it. It should be a substitute like Ruby. In addition, there are 2 Zamari with dark skin, and Ruby with feminine appearance also has 2. The appearance is exactly the same, even Ryotsu's fluctuations are exactly the same. Shimo emptied his eyes and looked at the 9 people in front of him. It's not dead, Ulquiorra. It looks like it should have been heavier at the time. Facing Shimo's provocation, Ulquiorra's expression remained calm, like a pool of stagnant water. Even if you confuse me, Master Aizen will be able to reshape me. Hearing this, Shimo raised his brow slightly. It seems that Aizen's transformation of you has already involved the essence of the soul. Ulquiorra did not continue to answer Shimo's words, but instead set his sights on the stranger Arrancar. Seems to be waiting for something. The faces of the Hueco Mundo conquest troops were solemn. The Ryotsu on Arrancar is far beyond their imagination.
No matter who it is, the level of Reiatsu is not weaker than that of the captain.
This time, it will really be a hard fight. Hiriko Shinji narrowed his eyes and raised his vigilance to the highest level. I saw the stranger Arrancar walking out of Espada, placing his hand on his zipper-like mask and flicking it lightly. Immediately, the mouth opened, revealing the layered dense teeth, opening and closing the room, giving people a sense of fear. Introduce yourself. In the hoarse voice, as if deliberately suppressing my desires. Unfamiliar Arrancar said, I'm the 10th Espada and my name is Ferdinand Manticore. By the order of Aizen-sama, come and kill Kyōraku Shimo. Chapter 165 Sound the Horn of War, Advertisement. Hearing that, Shimo raised his brows slightly and looked at the strange face in front of him with a little surprise.
The new 10th Espada, Manticore is not like his kind in appearance, it is as full of human imagination as possible.
On the contrary, Manticore looked like ordinary humans. The only difference is that there is a bone zipper on the stubborn mouth, which gives people a sense of penetration. Besides, Shimo didn't feel too strong Ryotsu in him. Perhaps Manticore is slightly stronger than other Espadas Ryotsu, but the strength is limited and does not exceed a category. With a boast, Oshioka squatted slightly, Ryotsu buzzed. With Shimo's consent, she initiated a contact with Lingting, Kendo. By the way, Sister Wa, Shimo said suddenly, help me deliver another message to the captain. Unohana Retsu looked over in surprise and asked, what news? Shimo emptied his eyes, looked at the 9 Espada Arrancars in front of him, and said bluntly. Aizen's King of Creation project should be implemented in a short period of time. Ji Lingting, get ready. In terms of high-end combat power, we are really at a disadvantage this time. When the voice fell, the 10 swords on the opposite side suddenly narrowed their eyes and stared at Shimo. Has the plan leaked? It seems that Shinigami, who looks weak, really has some ability. Master Aizen's plan can't be concealed from him, just leave all these guys behind. Confusing words. Let Shimo more affirm his thoughts. However, he was not completely sure. Reality is different from conception. In his case, Aizen is a real figure, a representative of resourcefulness and prudence. Maybe he will plan according to Jaume, talk about the dry key creation plan. However, it may also choose to change, his appearance is the existence of one of the biggest variables. The unfamiliar term, Wang Jian, is obviously very unfamiliar to some people in the Hueco Mundo expedition force. But like Kuchiki Ziza, Shihuan Yoruichi, Kurotsuchi Myuri and others, they still know Wang Jian well. In particular, a guy like Kurotsuchi Myuri who often invades the Great Lingshu Corridor is very clear about the meaning of the existence of Wang 867 key. Unohana Retsu's hand movement stopped slightly, and then she whispered. Now, I get it. Immediately, Unixen Kendo was built. Under Espada's gaze, Ovamahana passed the information back. The strong Ryotsu oppression of the surrounding Arrancars did not seem to interfere with the construction of Lianshun Kendo. They had expected this to happen long before they came to Hueco Mundo. Therefore, the Kendo Lianshun has been improved to a certain extent, so that it can withstand the oppression of Ryotsu to the maximum. Of course, the caster must also have the same high-level Captain Ryotsu to be able to ignore these disturbances. After a few seconds, the information transmission was completed, and the Lianshun Kendo was eliminated. In this process, the Arrancar Espadas on the opposite side did not interrupt them. Because they know that this situation has become established. Even if Kendo is interrupted, the other party will most likely send information through other methods. Fight. Ulquiorra looked at the crowd faintly, took a step forward, and stood on the same level as Manticore. He puts his hands in the pockets on both sides of the hakama, his expression is extremely calm and rational. Compared to their own kind, complete Aizen-sama's order as soon as possible. The corners of Manticore's mouth were wide open, and the multiple sharp teeth that were closely layered were exposed in front of everyone. Senran white air curled up from his mouth. That being the case, let's get started. The voice fell, but Ulquiorra took out a dark green ball from the pocket of the hakama. Under the sunlight, it exudes a faint light, giving people a strange feeling. Everyone, the battle has begun. Ulquisula's eyes did not fluctuate, and his palms used force to directly mold the dark green sphere into smashing pieces. Immediately, the palm of his hand opened, and countless dust flew from it. Upon seeing this, the people of the Hueco Mundo conquest troop suddenly tightened their nerves and raised their vigilance to the highest level. The spirit barrier opens, Shimo's eyes are shining like stars in the sky. It seems there is no danger. The dark green dust is full of dust, adding a bit of other colors to the monotonous Hueco Mundo. Under the breeze, the dust spread to far, far places. The new Ryotsu is here. Advertisement. Ulquiorra stretched out his fingertips, pointed straight at the sky, and his indifferent voice sounded. Void Soul Enchantment, open it. As soon as his words sounded, the huge dark green barrier immediately obscured the entire sky. What? What is this? It doesn't seem to be dangerous. If you care about so much, just chop them all. The dark green enchantment covers a wide area beyond Shimo's imagination. Even if he improves his vision to ultimate, he still can't see the end of the enchantment. It should be Aizen's backhand preparation. However, even though he was in the enchantment, he didn't notice its role for the time being. The so-called void enchantment, the strength of Ryotsu contained in it, is not too high. It's a soothing feeling. Grimjow closed his eyes and raised his face, spreading his hands as if embracing the sky. Shinigami, are you curious about the effect of this barrier? Let this uncle tell you, Void Soul enchantment can increase the strength of us in it by more than 3 times. The expression of sullenness appeared on his face. Grimjow looked at others frantically, the bone masks on his cheeks staggered, and his smile was extremely cruel. Next, let this uncle come and see, who is better to be my opponent. Looking like a beast, he scanned the Hueco Mundo conquest troops. Suddenly, his eyes stopped, as if he had found his own prey. Hungry for the eyes of fighting and fighting? Grimjow and Zaraki Kenpachi looked at each other and recognized that each other was of the same kind as themselves. Go to war. Boom. Since the sand splashed, the two figures suddenly staggered together and the blue and gold Ryotsu crashed into each other with an astonishing aura. Ryotsu, who was tens of meters high, blasted together, causing gusts of wind. Zaraki Kenpachi grinned and roared like a beast. Ha 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 ha, this is the battle that should be enjoyed. Nozarashi, full of gaps, is like some kind of heavy weapon, constantly being smashed by Zaraki Kenpachi. The rumbling sound echoed around it. The battle between the two seemed to have sounded the signal of war between the Hueco Mundo conquest troops and the Espadas. Others have also turned to opponents. What surprised Shimo was that Shihu and Yoruichi and Byakuya Kuchiki met Zamari together. As the fastest Espada, Zamari's strength is worthy of recognition. What's more, in this virtual soul barrier, there is more than 3 times the strength increase. Soon, the two of them fell into a bitter battle. Under Ulquiorra's signal, these guys gradually pulled their own battlefield away. The coverage of the Void Soul enchantment is wide enough, Bia, to sustain this battle. Of the 9 Arrancar Espadas, except for the new Espada Manticore, Shimo is most interested in Aranillo. In his memory, Metastasia has been completely killed by Shiba Kaien. What kind of methods will Aranillo use against the enemy? In addition, this guy is afraid of sunlight, which seems to be perfected by Aizen. On the inverted glass container, 2 faces are furious, showing different negative expressions. And his opponent is Kurotsuchi Myuri. Sharp nails rubbed against his side face, making a crunching sound. Kurotsuchi Myuri looked at Aranillo greedily. What an excellent experimental material. I can't bear the thought of trying to dispel you. With Yu Lian's teeth frightened, Nemoli stared at Aranillo. New voice. Is it convenient to tell me your name? Aranillo was taken aback, feeling that the shinigami in front of him seemed to be different from the shinigami in his mind. But he still said his name. Remember. We are the 7th Espada, Araniero Ururueri. Yi Yuli stretched his fingers up and tapped his temple lightly. I remember. I will write this name on the container bottle containing your body. Hearing this, Aranillo was furious, and the 2 faces made strange screams. Infiltrate people's hearts. Very peculiar ability, but unfortunately it doesn't work for me. Advertisement. Kurotsuchi Myuri grinned open, and the golden teeth reflected light under the void enchantment. Ulquiorra looked at the gentlewoman in front of him, her expression unchanged. However, in his perception of Ryotsu, the horror of the person in front of him is absolutely far beyond Shinigami's other people except Kyōraku Shimo. Captain of the 4th Division, Eggflower Lai. Unohana Retsu put his right hand on Zanpakutō on his waist, and the whole person's momentum gradually became cold. Although the smile remains the same, it gives Ulquiorra a feeling of coldness and death. A respectable opponent. Ulquiorra whispered, right index finger stretched out, the emerald green light bloomed on the fingertip. For a while, Ryotsu increased sharply between the two. Vizard's 3 captains existed, and they faced 2 Ruby respectively. Compared with the conversations between other captains, they and Arrancar have no common language at all. The battle that started right here seemed a lot decisive. Shimo glanced over the battlefield that was gradually being drawn away, and whispered softly. It seems that we are the only ones left not participating in the battle. Nilu stood beside Shimo, watching the remaining 2 Arrancars warily. Yami. Rialgo. Ferdinand Manticore. Nilu, that ugly big guy, I'll leave it to you. Shimo looked sideways and said to Nilu. When he spoke, he didn't evade Yami. Although the opponent Ryotsu has strengthened a lot, for Shimo, there is still no threat. Moreover, he believed in Nilu's strength. Nilu nodded lightly and exhorted. Shimo also needs to be careful, I'm going to fight. When Yami heard Shimo's words, his heart was filled with anger, but he didn't dare to attack him. The death of the split soul was deeply imprinted in his memory. Facing Shimo, he couldn't even have the courage to shoot. Anger and courage are 2 completely different emotions. Nilu left here and started a ringing turn towards the distance. Yami glanced at Manticle, and saw that the other party didn't pay attention to him at all, and then gritted his teeth and followed the figure of Nilu who was going away. Anyway, as long as you don't fight this guy named Kyōraku Shimo. Since Aizen-sama asked Manticore to deal with that guy. Yami's mouth raised slightly, his smile gradually cruel, his voice screamed in his dry throat. Then let him die. Boom. A huge force kicked on his abdomen. There was a severe pain, which interrupted Yami's thoughts. Before he had time to see exactly what happened, the whole person flew out like a cannonball. Yami. Rialgo. Facing others, Nilu's voice was cold, as if she was in the cold winter wind. You have overlooked the essence of fighting. Participating in battle, you should give your opponents the respect they deserve. Yami kept rolling from above the sand and finally stopped. He struggled to get up from the sand, his expression becoming more and more pure. Anger turned into flames, completely swallowing his other emotions. Respect. What a ridiculous and small word. In the face of absolute strength, the weak are not worthy of respect. Ni placed her Zanpakutō and the scabbard horizontally in front of her, and her cold tone sounded again. Did you overlook something? The same as Arankar, and my serial number is above you? Zanpakutō pulled out, and a light red Ryotsu appeared. Yami's pupils shrank suddenly and realized that something was wrong. Nilu's whole body Ryotsu exploded several times, agitating the sky and white sand, gradually covering her figure. It's very singing, Antelope Night. Chapter 166 Aizen's Gaze, Bite, Gluttony, Sasori Lion. Advertisement Shu Yi Palace above the main hall. Aizen sits on the highest throne, with his arms propped up and his face, calmly gazing at the light curtain in front of him. On the light curtain, multiple pictures flickered back and forth. The fierce battle, the explosive increase of Ryotsu, continues to show up now on the screen. Ichimaru Jin stood aside, paying attention to the changes on the screen, narrowing his eyes and completing an arc. Oh. What a terrible battle, the Espadas who have been blessed, directly suppress Shinigami. Aizen's daylight, wandering between the various screens. After a while, he spoke, temporary suppression cannot change the situation. Ulquiorra's current strength is not enough to annihilate the Shinigami. With Shimo-kun, it is extremely difficult to cause too many casualties. Hearing that, Ichimaru Jin's face showed some doubts. Then this way, will Hueco Mundo have too much combat power? Aizen's fingers tapped on the armrest of the throne, making a dull noise. Before answering this question, we might as well have a cup of black tea, silver. Ichimaru Jin was stunned for a while, and immediately took the teapot and cups from the side hall connected to the main hall. 11 The sound of tea hitting the teacup was particularly loud in the empty main hall. Aizen picked up the teacup, took a sip of the black tea, and slowly said, Silver, how do you understand the combat power of Hueco Mundo? Ichimaru Jin raised his head, raised his chin slightly, and pondered for a moment. Including me, Hueco Mundo, Espada and Arankars are the main fighting power of Hueco Mundo. Hearing this, Aizen raised his mouth slightly and smiled faintly.
Void is just a wartime method. They are different from you.
When I climb into the sky, you will be the only spectator around me. Ichimaru Jin's eyes moved slightly, and he lowered his head and said softly. My pleasure. Aizen put down the teacup and continued. Ulquiorra's biggest role is to hinder the progress of Shimo-kun and others. Just a certain amount of delay is enough. Hearing this, Ichimaru Jin's heart moved and remembered some of Aizen's previous actions. Is it related to the last experiment? Aizen slightly lowered his jaw and explained. Although the creation of Arankar has been completed in the end, it is still a long way from the evolution of the final form. For Ichimaru Jin, he seems to have nothing to hide. Hearing that Ichimaru Jin's fingers bend, it seems to be associated with something. After a long time, he let out a white breath, grinned lightly at the corner of his mouth, and said with a smile. Then do we need to go to Karakura town now? Aizen looked calm and said indifferently. No, the best time is not yet there. I want to see if Manticore can let Shimo-kun open a hole card. As he said, his eyes cast on the screen above the main hall again. In one of the pictures, two figures stand opposite each other. Compared with the fierce battle on other screens, it seems a bit quiet here. It was strangely quiet, in the inner circle of Hueco Mundo. The huge dark green enchantment shrouds thousands of miles of white desert in it. At the moment when Captain Ryotsu broke out, the weak animals near the battlefield were all turned into souls and escaped in the air. Start our battle. Manticore's zipper-like mouth kept opening and closing, but the sound came from his abdomen.
Kyōraku Shimo, I can no longer control my desire to fight. As his voice fell, Ryotsu burst out like a sea tide. The deep purple substantive Ryotsu will immediately be attached to Shu Li Fan Yang Shou all signed eggs. While perceiving this huge Ryotsu, the other battlefields are all sluggish for a while. They cast their gazes in the direction where Shimo was. Manticore, is he hiding so deeply? Although Ryotsu has experienced an increase of more than 3 times, it is too ridiculous, right? The 10th Espada is definitely not his full strength. After solving Shinigami, I must fight this guy once. Advertisement. Unlike the response of the 10 knives, Shinigami is more worried. Most of them have more or less relationship with Shimo. The friendship between each other, although not like Nilu, is often on the lips, but it is also engraved in the heart. When they felt this terrifying Ryotsu, their eyes were somewhat worried. He should be able to solve it after he is young, right? Shimo this guy, anyone who can beat me will never fall in such a place. Shikoro looked up and looked at the purple substance resembling the ocean tide, rising straight into the sky, Ryotsu. Tisk tusk, it seems, Aizen is trying to deal with me. Seping has made sufficient preparations,
Manticore's mouth split open, and his teeth seemed to be wriggling in it. The power of Aizen-sama, especially what you can guess. I saw his mouth suddenly opened, and his upper and lower jaws were divided into a strange angle. Two palms reached into it, and after a while, he took out a handful of Zanpakutō. Zanpakutō is entwined with saliva, which makes people feel sick. But the other party didn't seem to care at all. Seeing his hands on the handle of the knife, Ryotsu once again climbed a level. Oh, right. A smirk appeared on Manticore's face, and his eyes were full of cruel and arrogant expressions. Forgot to tell you. Void Soul Enchantment blesses my strength. 10 times. Boom. Its Ryotsu, once again exploded in a geometric multiple. The voice retweeted, and the whole person disappeared directly on the spot. Shimo's eyes are shining like stars, without the slightest expression of surprise. I saw him stretch out his hand and whispered softly. The 81 of Bakudo, splitting void, boom. A huge sound resounded above the splitting void barrier. The air needs to fluctuate. Ryotsu who feels divergent. All cattle production fluctuates greatly. The way of using Zanpakutō by Etikul is more similar to the way of using Zaraki Kenpachi. In his hand, it didn't seem to be a knife, but a heavy hammer or a great axe. Crazy slashing fell on the barrier formed by splitting void. However, after a few breaths, countless cracks appeared on the transparent barrier, as if it might collapse and dissipate at any time. Haha, Kyōraku Shimo, Manticore laughed wildly. Are you just this capable? I really disappointed Master Aizen's attention to you. Go to hell. Faced with his arrogant offensive again, Shimo's Ryotsu finally broke out at this moment. Boom. Click. Crunch. The sour bone cracking sound appeared on Manticore's body. The body leaping high in the air, fallen like a meteorite, a huge roar appeared on the sand. A horrible pit like a tianking buried Manticore deeply. The black Ryotsu spreads over him, and the weight like a mountain makes Manticore completely unable to stand. Ryotsu, a tenfold increase. Shimo stood on the edge of the pit, staring indifferently at Manticore, who was fractured in many places in the center. That's it. The contemptuous tone, like a sharp knife, pierced directly into Manticore's heart. Yitikir let out a low growl like a beast, his eyes flushed. He wanted to resist, but he couldn't even move his fingers. The extreme Ryotsu's violent oppression has reached the limit it can bear. Under this terrifying Ryotsu, his proud steel skin, self-proclaimed powerful Ryotsu, is completely useless. From the body, there are many explosions, and the sound of chewing crackling is shocking, but it also makes them feel terrified. Even in the midst of other battles, they are also watching Manticore's battle. Shimo, as the character that Aizen specially reminded, has demonstrated the strength that has made them feel fear. The blood oozes out of the pores, and Manticore makes an unbearable scream in his body pain. Ah! Perhaps the inner potential has exploded, or Shimo has slightly relaxed its suppression. At the moment of dying, Manticore finally held Zanpakutō in his hands upright, roaring through the battlefield here. Bite, blood and spokes, advertisement seeking flowers oh. Boom. As soon as the voice fell, the purple violent Ryotsu made his Zanpakutō soaring into the sky, and soon Manticore was completely wrapped in it. All the injuries on his body healed in a moment. High-speed regeneration.
At the same time, Manticore's body has also undergone tremendous changes.
He was originally in human form, but after returning to the edge, his limbs swelled and his body shape was above the ground. The white bones spread from the zipper on his face and shrouded behind him. Gathered to the tail vertebra, forming a thick white Sasori tail. Crunch, crunch. There was a sound on its back, and 2 cracks appeared on the skin, and black bones rushed out of it, turning into stubborn wings to spread apart, covering the entire pit. The original human form, Yitikir, is now transformed into a mythical pewter lion monster in the evening. At this moment, his Ryotsu is also showing an increase of geometric multiples, which is enough to offset the oppression caused by Shimo Ryotsu. White bones are attached to the sturdy limbs, climbing up from the pit step by step. Beneath the zippered face, countless teeth grew wildly, gleaming with cold light.
With blood-red eyes, staring at Shimo, I will chew you bit by bit, and then swallow it all.
Manticore's roar echoed. Shimo sees this, but there is still no emotional change. Is this your whole card? It's disappointing. He was not prepared to rely solely on Ryotsu's oppression, but to kill this new blade. If nothing else, this guy should have been specially made by Aizen for him. From the characteristics of Ryotsu, one can detect 1 or 2. However, it is still necessary to check the specific method. Shimo Hando stretched out, and a light blue Ryotsu light gathered on it. The gravel was flying, setting off a white dust storm, gradually burying the deep pit behind Manticore. His heart was facing the gluttonous Sasori lion, and he whispered. Hado no 88. Flying dragon strikes thieves and shakes the sky and thunder cannon. Boom. A huge blue-white beam of light instantly surged out of its palm, and the roaring thunder entangled it, exploding with unimaginable power. At this moment, the dark green virtual soul barrier was also stained with blue and white light. However, in the face of such a powerful attack, Manticore did not have the slightest fear. I saw his blood basin wide open, and the dense ridged teeth in it suddenly appeared, giving people an extremely frightening visual impact. Soon, the roaring thunder cannon was completely swallowed by it. Such a sight surprised Shimo a little bit. Is this what you call the whole card? He could clearly perceive that the moment Hado touched his mouth on the 88th, the Ryotsu nature on it seemed to have changed. Under the bite of the big mouth of the blood basin, the huge Ryotsu turned into food for Manticore. As the velvet swallows thunder into the body, its own Ryotsu is also constantly rising. Shimo frowned and finally realized the special nature of this Espada. Is it an Arankar created specifically for my Ryotsu characteristics? Manticore's blood basin was closed, and his eyes showed an unfinished look. It's delicious. With Ryotsu unable to oppress me, all your attacks will be ineffective to me. Accept death, tiny shinigami, pray, cry, feel your own humbleness. The roar resounded around Shimo. The 4 characters for the villain's Desi are vividly manifested in Manticore's body. Upon hearing these words, Shimo raised his brows slightly and his expression was a bit weird. Blind power has made you arrogant that you shouldn't have. However, when did you develop the illusion that my attack was not effective for you? Manticore was slightly stunned, and a bad premonition emerged from the bottom of his heart. Shimo slowly pulled out his Zanpakutō, a cold light flashed on the blade. Since you want to see it, let you see it, don't blink your eyes. Need it? He raised his gaze slightly, locked onto the virtual soul barrier above, and chuckled lightly. Still the space, thin. 0 Chapter 167 The meaning of gluttony, absolute suppression. Advertisement from beginning to end, Shimo knew that Aizen's surveillance was just above the virtual soul barrier. Maybe Ulquiorra didn't mention it, maybe Aizen didn't tell him at all. But the drought is certain, Akama, who unfolded from the void soul barrier, has a new sense of surveillance appearing around Shimo. Therefore, he did not share ideas with Manticore. Everything is just communicating with Aizen. Manticore at this moment is just a barking beast. The swelling power made him gradually lose himself, unable to find the right way to live. Provoking others has become the best way to establish a sense of existence. As Shimo's voice fell, the black Ryotsu dried up, where Shimo was holding the handle of the knife. Zhe Yan opened up, like a lotus flower, and wrapped his hoof guard in it.
The substantive oppressive force once again descended on Manticore.
The shrinking pupils indicate that he finally realized the gap between each other. However, the tiny brain makes Manticore unable to think normally at this time.
At the moment the oppressive force came, anger burned away its remaining sanity.
Manticore's crazy roar sounded, shaking the surrounding air, forming a shock wave visible to the naked eye, spreading towards Shimo. However, before reaching Shimo within 10 meters, he was directly destroyed by the oppressive force generated by his Ryotsu.
Manticore opened his blood basin, his countless sharp teeth squirming, as if he was about to swallow everything in front of him.
After returning to the blade, Ryotsu climbed to the top level of 870.
A large number of purple Ryotsu frantically gathered towards his mouth.
As his head was raised, the black number, 10, was engraved on his Adam's apple, which also appeared in front of Shimo. Shimo raised his brow slightly, a little surprised. Is it really only the 10th Espada? I thought I would be like Yacha, and I will talk about the flute and 10 knives after Gue Renshi.
It seems that this guy is just a cannon fodder launched by Aizen for experimentation, and has not advanced to a higher level.
Shimo shook his head and didn't care too much. You have a whole card, and I also have a whole card. In the next round, it depends on whose whole card is bigger. After being compressed by ultimate, the purple Ryotsu turned into a purple-black ball, and the scene floated in Manticore's mouth. Between the light blooming, the space has a faint sense of vibration. Boom! The purple-black ball erupted from the mouth of its blood basin, forming a huge beam of light tens of meters in diameter, which seemed to swallow Shimo in it. Sero attack after fully charged. The strongest attack that Manticore can perform right now. Shimo, who was on the opposite side, completed his Shikai at the moment his attack broke out. As his wrist shook, the black Ryotsu wrapped around Zanpakutō, the blood-red slender blade appeared in front of Manticore. Facing the Sero beam of light that destroyed everything, Shimo's face didn't change much. Zanpakutō lifted his hand lightly and cut it off without warning.
Suddenly, rushing into the Sero beam of light like the eruption of the ocean tide, suddenly the speed slowed down.
Manticore found with some horror that the Sero attack after he had charged up seemed to have stalled. While the speed is slowing down, it is also being constantly dissipated by its own strength. In this case, Manticore even broke out his powerful Ryotsu. After devouring the thunder cannon, Ryotsu burst out together. After climbing a bit of strength again, he looked at the unchanging Sero beam of light, and seemed to be a little bit out of skill. The space that was originally unblocked seemed to be full of deep malice towards him at this time. I seem to be in Mercury, even the turning of my eyes seems unsustainable. Please continue your performance, Manticore. Shimo smiled and said, the so-called big talk that swallows everything, I hope you are not just talking. When the voice fell, the oppression of the surrounding space was even better. With the change of Shimo's Ryotsu, the effect of space stagnation has become more and more amazing. Based on the coverage of its Ryotsu, all spatial changes cannot escape Shimo's control. The stagnant space completely enveloped Manticore. Shimo's mind moved, and the horrible Sero beam of light was instantly transformed into countless souls and scattered in the void enchantment. Manticore's sluggish eyes flashed with heavy horror. The blow I was so proud of didn't even hurt the opponent's clothes, Kakuzu. But the opponent's random attack, he needs to burst out all his strength to resist. Such a huge gap once again patched Manticore's battered heart. Under extreme emotional stimuli, Manticore's other year-round startling action. Shimo noticed this, and a strange look appeared on his face. The soul is dying. I saw that on Manticore Sasori's lion-like weird body, purple Ryotsu appeared continuously, among which there were strands of red Ryotsu floating. Advertisement like blood. At the next moment, Manticore's body also changed. The skin is constantly torn, countless dense teeth burrow out of it, and the gaps are constantly opening and closing, swallowing the space stagnation imposed by Shimo. Its Ryotsu once again climbed several times, and it seems to have surpassed the vast majority of Espada. As if countless people were whispering in your ears, overlapping voices passed through the Ryotsu blockade and echoed directly in your heart. At the same time, in Suya Palace, Aizen Sudo propped up his cheek and looked at the scene in front of him with interest. Manticore's changes did not seem to surprise him. Ichimaru Jin, who was standing aside, saw this scene, and his face was obviously shocked. He also participated in the creation of Ganmanticle. But from the beginning to the end, he didn't know that Manticore possessed such power in his body. As if he had sensed the doubts in Ichimaru Jin's heart, Aizen on the throne slowly spoke. Manticle's power comes from gluttony. In fact, this term can be understood in two parts. Hearing that, Ichimaru Jin moved in his heart and said, "Bum and eating?" Aizen's jaws, a meaningful smile appeared on his face. For Shimo-kun Ryatsu's eating characteristics and the violent characteristics of being in the Jedi. When the two are unified, Manticore will show the true form of the sword. His gaze shifted to the light curtain again, and he whispered softly. Shimo-kun, what kind of surprises will you bring to me? In exchange for the death of the soul for the final explosion? After a little observation, Shimo can see the state of Manticore himself at this moment. It seems that the flip card game will start now. Shimo said to himself Manticore's sanity in front of him has been completely wiped out. There is only one goal left, and that is to eat everything in front of him. Numerous cracks made overlapping roars, and immediately their wings vibrated behind them, breaking through the blockade of space. Manticore's sturdy claws went straight to Shimo. Facing the attack, Shimo still didn't panic at all. From his line of sight, one could vaguely see the wide mouth of the blood basin above the sharp claws, where the teeth squirmed, perfectly interpreting the word greed. After losing your mind, you don't know anything about power. Shimo said lightly. Extremely Ryotsu burst out. Boom. Manticore's claws are no more than an inch away from Shimo, but this inch is like a moat and cannot be crossed at all. A behemoth several meters long, stuck in the air, unable to fall or move forward. If your whole card is nothing more than that. A trace of disdain flashed in Shimo's eyes, and he said lightly, that really disappointed me. I saw his right hand stretched out, and Ryotsu kept surging in his palm. In an instant, a black ball appeared in it, and at the same time, Ryotsu around Shimo was like a roaring ocean wave, surging crazily. Vaguely reveals a turbid coat of arms, unruly talent.
The tide, denial, paralysis, a moment, hinders long sleep.
The crawling iron princess, the clay doll that keeps on self-mutilation, combine, bounce, and extend to the ground. Know your own powerlessness. The black ball disappeared in Shimo's heart, appearing abruptly above Manticle. Shimo closed his palms and said softly, 90 black coffin of Hado. The next moment, a black high wall appeared in front of Manticore, his irrational scarlet eyes, as if he had sensed the coming of death. A look of horror appeared in it. The biological instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages makes Manticore want to avoid this attack. However, everything is over. The black high wall is like countless pieces of self-conscious jigsaw pieces, constantly spreading, piecing together, merging, and forming an indestructible tall wall at the moment of merging. Immediately afterwards, the same black walls of 6 paths appeared on the top, bottom, left and right of Manticore, blocking all possible escape routes. The tearing pain of the drama came from every part of the body. The pain restored Manticore's sanity a lot, but the darkness in front of him, as if despair in the true sense, shrouded his heart. Advertisement countless cracks activated their abilities, wanting to swallow the black walls and save themselves. However, the speed of its devouring is not as fast as the speed of recovery and replenishment. Sneer the sound of the sharp blade piercing into the flesh finally cut off all Manticore's thoughts. Countless shadow blades penetrated his body completely through the cracks in his body. The soul fades, Ryotsu escapes. Desperate death fell on Manticore. Black coffin was lifted, and he saw his goal again while he was still alive, Kyōraku Shimo. From beginning to end, Shimo's expression has not changed much. In his eyes, there is no one named Ferdinand Manticore Espada Arankar. Maybe only Aizen-sama is worthy to confront such an enemy, right? As the last thought dissipated, Manticore's scarlet eyes dimmed completely. Shimo glanced at his completely dead body and shook his head. Swallowing Hado on the 88, it is the mentality of thinking that the world is invincible. It is really undesirable. A look of horror appeared in it. The biological instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages makes Manticore want to avoid this attack. However, everything is over. The black high wall is like countless pieces of self-conscious jigsaw pieces, constantly spreading, piecing together, merging, and forming an indestructible tall wall at the moment of merging. Immediately afterwards, the same black walls of 6 paths appeared on the top, bottom, left and right of Manticore, blocking all possible escape routes. The tearing pain of the drama came from every part of the body. The pain restored Manticore's sanity a lot, but the darkness in front of him, as if despair in the true sense, shrouded his heart. Countless cracks activated their abilities, wanting to swallow the black walls and save themselves. However, the speed of its devouring is not as fast as the speed of recovery and replenishment. Sneer the sound of the sharp blade piercing into the flesh finally cut off all Manticore's thoughts. Countless shadow blades penetrated his body completely through the cracks in his body. The soul fades, Ryotsu escapes. Desperate death fell on Manticore. Black coffin was lifted, and he saw his goal again while he was still alive, Kyōraku Shimo. From beginning to end, Shimo's expression has not changed much.
In his eyes, there is no one named Ferdinand Manticore Espada Arankar.
Maybe only Aizen-sama is worthy to confront such an enemy, right?
As the last thought dissipated, Manticore's scarlet eyes dimmed completely. Shimo glanced at his completely dead body and shook his head.
Swallowing Hado on the 88, it is the mentality of thinking that the world is invincible. It is really undesirable. Kendo has a demarcation point between the 89th and the 90th. Kendo number 90 and Kendo number 89 are not at the same level.
Starting from the 90th, Kendo's power and difficulty of release have been greatly improved.
For Shimo, the flying 0.0 Dragon Strike Thieves open-air thunder cannon just now is nothing more than a test piece's attack.
Abandoning the chanting Kendo, and completely chanting Kendo, there is a huge difference in power. Let alone the difference between Hado number 88 and Hado no. 90. After solving his opponent, Shimo looked at the teammates in the virtual spirit barrier. Squirting, the situation is really not optimistic. As far as I can see, except for Unohana Retsu, all the other captains are at a disadvantage.
What made him feel strange is that even the deputy captains are in a hard fight.
They are far away from them, and they are fighting fiercely with 2 subordinate officers.
The turbulent pressure, the roaring narrow bone cannon, the 3-step sword smashed with a kitchen knife. The flashing sero, erratic ringing, blazing dazzling flames. Shimo did not deliberately care about the battle of the adjutants, just swept away. Although the battle is anxious, but those guys, there is no danger of life.
On the contrary, it was one of the captains, who was dying, and the whole person looked very miserable.
Shimo's eyes flickered, thinking whether to save him.
This guy de Yuli is too curious. But if you die here, it's still a bit difficult to handle.
At that time, the face will not be justified. Thinking like this in his heart, Shimo pondered for a moment and made a decision. In that case, save this guy. Chapter 168 Kurotsuchi Myuri fled. Aizen is in action. Advertisement Cocoon was panting heavily, staring at the weird creature before him. 7 heads, 39 arms, 28 legs, and countless eyes and mouths. Is this your limit? Aranillo let out a weird laugh. Gia, really humble and useless shinigami. The toxins you rely on have absolutely no effect on us. It seems that this battle is over. As the only Jillian in Espada, Alanillo's existence can be said to be quite special. The ability to eat the emptiness allows him to continuously integrate shinigami or other imaginary abilities.
With endless abilities, most of Kurotsuchi Myuri's methods are scrapped.
It can only be said that it was bad luck, so Kurotsuchi Myuri chose the one of his most restrained Arankar. I saw Yu Li raise the half-mutilated handhole, reached into his arms, and took out a needle of green reagent. As he injected the reagent into his own blood vessels, granulation sprouts in the crippled area of his body and healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, when he was about to recover, he suddenly vomited black liquid, and he was lying on the ground and vomiting constantly. Hoo-ha! Ha! What a terrible enemy! Kurotsuchi Myuri's weird smile still remains, and Seping did not feel any tears because of her failure. But if I can reselect my opponent, I will still pick you. He stood up with difficulty, his appearance has returned to normal. If you ignore the black liquid that is constantly overflowing from his mouth, Kurotsuchi Myuri is no different from normal shinigami. Aranillo, your presence has made me realize a way for imperfection to gradually develop towards perfection. However, while becoming perfect, it will lead to the birth of new imperfections. Ha ha ha, in my eyes, you are the best experimental material. Kurotsuchi Myuri raised his head and laughed, black liquid leaking from the corners of his mouth. 14. Seeing him crazy, Aranillo felt a sense of anxiety in his heart. Aranillo, who felt the change in his own mood, suddenly became a little bit angry. Damn it, we are perfect beings, go to death for me. The corners of Kurotsuchi Myuri's mouth are raised, and his expression looks very strange under the application of the black liquid. Suddenly, he lowered his head, and groaned like an evil spirit. Untie. Golden is killing Jizo. Ryotsu skyrocketed. Kurotsuchi Myuri's Zanpakutō was directly enveloped by the huge Ryotsu. Ryotsu, which had grown several times, gave Aranilo a look of horror on the two faces. Damn it, guy, you should have killed you earlier. Nibble it all away. Bite the emptiness. In the face of Kurotsuchi Myuri's rising Ryotsu, Aranilo also launched his own return. Ryotsu swept like a gust of wind, wrapping his whole body, and the sound of skin tearing and bone bursting could be faintly heard. The two Ryotsu collided in the middle, stirring up a white dust storm tens of meters high. After a while, the dust storm dissipated, and two behemoths were suspended in the air, facing each other. On one side is like a centipede, with a baby's head, which is killing the Jizo, surrounded by fleshy pillars and limbs, spewing purple poisonous mist from the mouth, gradually spreading throughout the entire void enchantment. Both sides on the other battlefields noticed that behind this scene, they all subconsciously stayed away from the direction where the poisonous fog drifted from. On the other side, it is a monster in the true sense. It looks like a Chisa, even surpassing Gengsha Jizo. Aranilo showed all the main features of the Shu and Shinigami that he had swallowed. Because of the huge amount of imaginary and Shinigami that it devours, some of the features are superimposed. Just looking at the past, it gives people an indescribable sense of horror. On the body that is tens of meters high, there are almost all kinds of limbs. The dense eyes suddenly brightened when they saw the killing Kyōraku. The overlapping sound came out from his mouth. Aranilo shouted in surprise. Zanpakutō in the form of cattle? It seems that our collection is going to increase again. During his speech, countless purple poisonous mist rushed into his multiple mouths. However, Aranilo showed an intoxicated air, self-indulged in it. What a delicious poisonous mist. Humble Shinigami, your abilities are invalid for me. Jia ha 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 ha. Among the emptiness or Shinigami that it swallows, there are many existences with poison attribute abilities. This has also led to Aranilo's high resistance to toxins. Advertisement Kurotsuchi Myuri's strength lies in its scientific research capabilities. Countless methods have enabled him to face any type of enemy with corresponding methods. However, when encountering an Aranilo who has more means than him, the difficulty will inevitably rise a few levels. He even said that Yuli is not its opponent at all. Boom! Aranilo's body suddenly exploded, and a large amount of red blood erupted like a flood. For a time, the scene was truly spectacular. As the color of the blood gradually turned into purple, Aranilo realized that he had been poisoned by the other party. Even Captain Shimo will not be blindly confident enough to breathe in the poisonous mist I created at will. The corners of Kurotsuchi Myuri's mouth are open, and the golden teeth look very weird against the black liquid. A mere Arankar, what right does it have to be so rampant? Ahem, both were poisoned, and the scene was once spectacular. At this moment, Shimo has come to the battlefield here, watching the two monsters that are constantly vomiting blood. His mouth twitches slightly. Why is Kurotsuchi Myuri's style of painting often different from others? This peculiar way of fighting is really hard to understand. What does it mean now? Is it more bleeding than anyone else? Kurotsuchi Myuri raised the sealed state Zanpakutō in his hand and waved it towards Aranilo. Tear this guy. As his voice fell, the killing ground was dancing in the air, the sharp blade trembling under his body, rushed towards Aranilo. The poisonous fog is flying in the air, permeating. In the next moment, the two behemoths were already fighting together. All kinds of weird liquid splashes, not scattered with limbs, the scene was once very spectacular. It's an incomprehensible battle. Shimo walked up to Kurotsuchi Myuri, noticed his state, and subconsciously attached a layer of Ryotsu protection to his body. Although he has the ability of virtual steel skin, he still doesn't want the black liquid spit out from Kurotsuchi Myuri's mouth to be contaminated to himself. Kurotsuchi Myuri, are you not dead? Hearing Shimo's voice, Kurotsuchi Myuri turned around, the bright smile still. Before I knew all of your Zanpakutō's abilities. How can I die? Kurotsuchi Myuri swayed, as if he was drunk, but Captain Shimo, when did you learn the ability to clone? Puff. With a muffled noise, Kurotsuchi Myuri fell on his back, the black liquid still seeping out. Elder brother. Shimo took a breath, is it really not going to die? It feels like Kurotsuchi Myuri will not live long. However, his words fell. Kurotsuchi Myuri backhanded out an injection from nowhere, and injected it directly into his temple. As the injection was completely submerged, the next moment this guy turned into a puddle of green liquid and wriggled away towards the distance. Shimo. Co-author is here waiting for myself to come over. The tall shadow completely enveloped Shimo. He looked up and saw Aranilo staring at him with countless eyes. What about Shinigami of damn it? We haven't torn him to pieces and swallowed it. As Kurotsuchi Myuri turned into a liquid and escaped away, the killing Jizo also disappeared. After Aranilo lost his target, he noticed that he was nearby Shimo. It turns out that's the case. Shimo nodded thoughtfully, as he understood the situation. Kurotsuchi Myuri itself can't hold it anymore, and can only wait for the arrival of this reinforcement. When Shimo arrived here on the battlefield, he had conceived the route and method of escape. Although my original purpose was to help this guy solve the battle. But this feeling of being used is a bit unpleasant. Shimo said to himself. Seeing this tiny ant-like shinigami at his feet, Arenilo didn't pay attention to his intentions at all, and couldn't help being furious. Humble shinigami, I'm talking to you. Immediately, the stacked hands were pressed down towards Shimo, and there were even flames, poisonous gas and other attack methods attached to them. While Ryotsu is huge, it also has a complex meaning. Advertisement Shimo's sunlight rose slightly, and the cold light flashed by. The mood that was a little uncomfortable because of the benefit of the cocoon was suddenly transferred to Arenilo's body. Hado no 88. Flying Dragon strikes thieves and shakes the sky and Thunder Cannon. The howling Thunder Cannon flew out of Shimo's palm, and immediately swallowed Arenilo's huge arm. The creaking sound came from his 1,000 arms. Without the resistance of Manticore, he couldn't resist Shimo's attack at all. Arenilo was also decisive and broke his arm on his own, trying to escape. However, Shimo's attention has always been on him. How can such a huge body escape from him? Although I don't know how Aizen has transformed you.
Zanpakutō in Shimo's hand raised gently, but the complex power is not the confidence you can rely on. For an existence like you, the best destination is to become a soul.
Return to heaven and earth. Sword slashing blade.
As the anger fell, countless black gaps appeared in the space around Arenilo. The unstoppable space was split and landed on his huge 870 body.
The next moment, the blade of Zonkong erupted, wheezing. Numerous huge wounds erupted on Arenilo's body. Ah! Shocking screams, in the virtual soul space, conveyed a long, long distance. With this knife going down, Arenilo has completely lost his breath of life.
Even, the blade of Zonkong directly crushed his soul completely, leaving no trace of it. The dissipated, colorful Madara Reiatsu returned to Hueco Mundo. The death of another Espada in the Arankar camp caused the fighting rhythm of the other guys to speed up a lot.
At this moment, they finally realized one thing: whether the two camps will win or not is not determined by them. It was Ferdinand Manticore and Kyōraku Shimo. Once the two of them are divided, the final direction of the so-called war is also determined. At the same time, in Suya Palace, Aizen sat on the throne, watching Zanpakutō falling by Shimo, thinking slightly. Then, with a light wave of his hand, he lifted the picture on it. Yeah. Ichimaru Jin was a little surprised. Isn't Aizen-sama stop watching? Aizen's movements stopped for a while and said calmly.
The benefits that Arankars can bring have ended here.
Although Manticore did not force Shimo-kun to open a whole card. However, a small amount of information was collected, and they blocked enough time. Ichimaru Jin nodded, and continued. So shall we proceed with the original plan now? Hearing that, Aizen's eyes are slightly frozen, and he stays on Ichimaru Jin's fox smile. Yin, you seem to be very anxious. The smile on Ichimaru Jin's face didn't change at all, and he smiled and said.
Now, after all, I also hate this dirty world. Aizen is not too entangled in this topic.
He stood up and walked toward the outside of the main hall. The Arankars have reached their limit. The plan for delaying time ends here. Aizen's voice echoed in the silent main hall when he walked to the entrance of the main hall. He turned his eyes slightly, looked at Ichimaru Jin, and raised the corners of his mouth. Next. Let's go see the changes we want. Chapter 169 Faithful Believer, the Cursed Sangha of Chaos. Advertisement in the Virtual Soul Enchantment. Arenilo's death was like a signal. The battles on many other battlefields also gradually came to an end. Among them, the most dominant is Visored. After all, Genbi is a weaker existence in Espada. As a substitute for Espada, his strength is really limited. Even if Naoko Hiriko and the others did not use the screen to solve it, it was enough to gradually suppress it in the tug of war. After many crises, Ruby also showed her own destiny. Hang him, Du Niang. As the multiplied Ryotsu exploded, 8 tentacles emerged behind Ruby, dancing in the air. The two comparisons carried out sword liberation almost at the same time. And under Shimo's observation, there was also a little connection with each other on Ryotsu. Although it is not strong, it really exists. For the sake of the causal chain? Shimo thought slightly, but soon, he gave up on this move. Thinking about this kind of thing, let's leave it to professionals. Zhigan, how did Aizen split these Arankars into 2, and made their strength rise a lot? Shimo doesn't know, but according to Urahara Kazuki's speculation, in addition to borrowing from Hogyoku's power of creation, the rest comes from its own scientific research capabilities. Hundreds of years of experiments on the soul made Aizen have a better understanding of the soul than everyone in the Soul Society. The emergence of imaginary whiteness is a milestone in its scientific research road. At the moment, the appearance of remnant void and dual soul void hole proves that Aizen has gone further in this regard. After Ruby returned to the sword, her strength rose a lot, but the combination of the two still couldn't resist Visored's constant cannibalization. His Ryotsu is constantly being consumed. The injuries on his body are also increasing. The bloody tentacles show that Ruby has gradually come to an end. When Shimo saw this, he stopped paying too much attention to the Visored battle. Under Hiriko Shinji's battle rhythm master, there is no suspense in their battle anymore. The existence of the void enchantment seems to be attached to the Ryotsu of Hueco Mundo itself. Shimo looked at the dark green enchantment above, his brows slightly voted. If this barrier is broken, I think it should make the battle end faster. However, he had been in battle and observed carefully. Even if the aftermath of its air-slashing blade is overlaid on the void soul enchantment, it can't have any effect on it. Aizen's research on Hueco Mundo is in depth far beyond Shimo's imagination. I thought I had the upper hand this time. Shimo sighed. I still can't underestimate Aizen. At the moment, I can only participate in the battle personally, and the battle is quick to decide. Where to go next? Shimo scanned the battlefield and quickly locked the two of them who were constantly flashing. Shihuan Yoruichi, known as Flash Goddess, and Zamari, who has the fastest turn. Different from the turbulent Ryotsu on other battlefields, the bursting attack, the roaring Sero. The fight between Shihuan Yoruichi and Marley seems a bit different. The figures of the two turned into afterimages, constantly staggering in various places in the void enchantment, and even shuttled on the battlefield of other people. In this situation, it is inevitable that Zaraki Kenpachi uttered a few curses. Intervening in his battle is like grabbing food from the mouth of a hungry tiger, which greatly provokes the opponent's tolerance limit. With their indiscriminate attacks, the two can only stay away from this battlefield again. Shinigami, your speed surprised me. Zamari looked down from beginning to end, without sorrow or joy. Even in the midst of war, he is still in this state, like a devout believer. But you still have no chance of winning. As if tired of this purposeless chasing scene, Zamari suddenly accelerated, and several clones broke away and surrounded Shihuan Yoruichi. The sudden change made Shihuan Yoruichi vigilant, and she subconsciously entered a defensive state, vigilant against the opponent's actions. However, Zamari suddenly stopped on the spot, his hands clasped together. The Zanpakutō in his hand was suspended in front of his chest, and his head twisted to the side. Zanpakutō followed the twists and released a large amount of smoke, enveloping Zamari itself. As the smoke cleared, Shihuan Yoruichi looked at the image of Zamari in surprise. There are a few more black lines on the face and jaw. And his lower body, his legs have disappeared, turned into a peach-colored pumpkin-shaped ball, floating in the air. There are dozens of eyes with yellow pupils all over the body. Advertisement, accept my trial, Shinigami. Zamari's voice was low, as if muttering to himself. As his voice fell, a deep purple light suddenly shot out in the eyes of Shihuan Yoruichi looking at Shihuan Yoruichi. Shihuan Yoruichi was wary in his heart, and naturally wouldn't let the opponent attack him. However, as the frequency of her attacks increases, her pressure is also increasing. Until it was surrounded by several deep purple rays of light, when there was no escape, his body suddenly flickered.
The large sleeves float down in the air, and are engraved with sun-like black lines by the deep purple light.
Secret footwork of 3 empty cicadas. The figure of Shihuan Yoruichi suddenly appeared behind Zamari. On the light palm, thunder and lightning jumped, shining with dazzling light. However, Zamari, with his back to her, suddenly opened his back eyes. You can't escape my trial. Zamari's daylight is hanging down slightly, and deep purple rays are glared from the eyes on its back. And Shihuan Yoruichi was in midair at this time, and it seemed too late to change his moves. At this moment, a calm voice rang in her ears. Immediately afterwards, Shihuan Yoruichi fell into a warm embrace. The 81 of Bakudo splitting void. In an instant, the transparent barrier that penetrates the sky and the earth blocked the dark purple light, and the black sun pattern was imprinted on the barrier. Little Shimo. Shihuan Yoruichi's voice is slightly lower than usual. It seems a bit unexpected. But in the subconscious, Shimo appeared as it should be. However, she wrapped Shimo's neck with her backhand, and whispered in her ear. I was protected by you again, however, this feeling is good. Immediately, Shihuan Yoruichi released his arm and left the battlefield here, standing and watching from a distance. For Shimo, she has absolute confidence. Enemies that you can't solve, if you hand it over to Shimo, there will be no problems. And all she has to do is zinchong Shimo's posture to crush the enemy. At this time, Zamari's eyes in the state of returning to the blade suddenly froze on Shimo's body. The thick voice sounded like a bass horn. Kyōraku Shimo? Zamari clasped his hands together and pressed pressure on the lower half of the peach-colored pumpkin. It seems to be a vice shared by you, Shinigami. His eyes drooped slightly, and he couldn't see the slightest sorrow and joy. Shimo intervened in a battle, although the spoken language is responsible for speaking and acting. However, judging from his facial expressions, this matter seemed to have nothing to do with him. Shimo looked at Zamari with a calm expression and didn't take it to heart. Fighting? What you were talking about is the kind of kid-like play just now? Hearing that, Zamari's arm is tight, and green veins can be vaguely seen on it. This performance can be imagined, the change in his mentality. However, there is still not much change in his face. As if all this has nothing to do with it, is that so? Zamari's head is slightly lowered, and he looks at his happily hand haul.
It seems that I need to use battle to prove myself.
Even if you pay the price of your life for it. As soon as the voice fell, Zamari's eyes suddenly opened on the upper body, and the strange dark purple aura suddenly spread from it and enveloped the surroundings. Feel the power of love, Zamari's voice whispered, like a small whisper. Faced with such an attack, Shimo didn't change his expression too much. On the contrary, Shihouen Yoruichi, who was watching the battle, grabbed his heart tightly. Although she has confidence in Shimo, it does not mean that she wants to see her hurt. However, the indifferent expression on Shimo's face made Shihouen Yoruichi a little relieved. Don't you dodge? Zamari's gaze was firmly fixed on Shimo's body. Your arrogance will eventually lead to your final death.
Faced with the erosion of the aura of saying, Shimo stretched out the palm of his left hand to resist it.
Advertisement for a while, the black sun pattern was engraved on his palm. Seeing this scene, Zamari's heart originally held up slowly placed.
In his opinion, after being attacked by his ability,
everything has become a fixed number. I saw Zamari's gaze twisted, looking in the direction of the Suya Palace, his expression pious, like a believer. A great master Aizen, the manticore you valued has not fulfilled its mission. Now, Zamari faithfully obeys your orders. Keep your eyes down, Zamari, your disciple, will offer you a trivial sacrifice.
Seeing Zamari who looked like a god stick, Shimo's eyes became a little weird.
What is this unfolding? In his memory, Zamari is the most loyal to Aizen among Espada. However, it has not reached the level of complete loss of oneself. In his opinion, the current Zamari is more like a puppet manipulated by people. Is the prayer over? Shimo said boredly. Aizen doesn't have the time to watch you perform here.
Maybe he has gone to bed. Hearing Shimo's words, Zamari's eyes opened in front of his chest, and a thick voice sounded. This time, there was a bit of anger. The humble Shinigami dared to call Master Aizen.
Accept your own trial, you will eventually pay the price of a sinking egg.
Zamari's arms were raised high, and the eyes on it were turning. Indulge in screaming in love. The loud shout seemed to bring a hint of Reiatsu's tremor.
Shimo, who was standing opposite to him, also felt the change from Tang Shin's. However, the impact of this change on him is not as violent as cutting his nails. He looked at Zamari, who was like a magic stick, with interest. After a while, Zamari finally realized that it was wrong. When he spoke again, there was a bit of tremor in his voice. How can it be? Why are you, Qian Zhao's, not controlled by love? Why does the curse Ai Sanga's ability have no effect at all? Speaking of the end, his voice is roaring, and his sanity is gradually losing. Shimo slightly voted his eyebrows, his hands rubbed his chin, thinking. Soon, he gave his answer. I saw it tentatively replied. Perhaps because your love is not deep enough. Hearing this, Zamari's expression froze. If by this time, he still hasn't understood that the other party is just playing with him, then it can only show that the transformation of the split soul has greatly affected his brain. The humble Shinigami. This sentence seems to be squeezed out between Zamari's teeth. His expression was distorted, and the black lines on his face became more and more weird. The next moment, its Reiatsu climbed up, and Zamari's eyes all over his body suddenly opened. In front of the pupil, purple rays of light converged continuously. As the eyeballs gurgled, they locked the only enemy in front of them. Kyōraku Shimo. I will use the abilities that Master Aizen has given me to give you the most desperate gesture of death. Zamari roared, the whole person has fallen into madness. I saw the peach-colored pumpkin body in the lower half of his body suddenly split, and countless black torrents rushed out of it, soaking the sandy surface under him. Twisted flesh like tentacles, spreading from it. Zamari seemed to have changed his posture again, and the black lines on his face spread all over his body in an instant. The whole person gives a very strange feeling. Zamari clasped his hands together, with a crazy expression, and muttered in a low voice. Disorder everything. Cursed Ai Sanga. Chapter 170 Zamari of the second stage, the battle that gradually ended. Advertisement. The scene in front of me completely exceeded Shimo's expectation. For Zamari's changes, he had a guess in his mind. However, at this moment, the changes in Zamari in front of him are not enough to confirm his conjecture. As Zamari's voice fell, his right arm was raised, and under Shimo's surprised gaze, he inserted it into his chest at a very fast speed. Immediately, a beating heart was pulled out of it, with something similar to blood vessels connected to it. Immediately afterwards, Zamari's Reiatsu climbed rapidly again. As if hitting hormones, the changes in Reiatsu itself have gradually approached the original Manticore. You know, Manticore had only swallowed one of Shimo's thunder cannons before reaching such a level. What's more, he himself has 10 times the increase of Reiatsu's void enchantment. With so many blessings, Zamari is still chasing up. It can only be said that Zamari itself has great potential. Does the so-called love reach ultimate? Shimo's eyes flickered. He has confirmed his previous guess. Erden returned to the edge, the powerful power gained after sacrificing oneself completely. Denying all his previous abilities, reawakening the essence of the void, and performing the second sword liberation. In Shimo's perception, Zamari holding his heart aloft at this moment is more like a shooting star across the horizon. Although bright, but only for this moment. I saw Zamari holding his heart aloft, and then shattering it without hesitation. Blood splattered, and the strange dark purple aura continued to spread from it. Under Shimo's gaze, those deep purple auras didn't attack him, but instead enveloped Zanmari himself. Under the influence of this breath, its whole body is covered by black sun patterns. He, who was originally black, looked even more inhuman at this time. After the deep purple breath was completely absorbed by Zanmari, there was a messy low groan from the surrounding area. After this sound entered the ear, it stirred people's minds. Disturbed emotions emerged in Shimo's heart. However, this momentary feeling was quickly eliminated by it. However, a surprised expression appeared on Shimo's face. 870. Is the strength after Erden Gibang actually reached such a level? Hearing his words, Zanmari looked crazy and shouted. Erduan Gui Edge? The power of hate is ultimate? When the voice fell, his eyes closed, but his resentment was conveyed to Shimo's side. Ryotsu, who roars like a sea tide, comes toward its oppression. Let it die, Shinigami. Use your death as the best gift for Aizen-sama. Zanmari shouted, arms spread out in a hug. Immediately, there was a dazzling purple light around his body. Curse spirit explosive bombs. The power that transcends the limit obtained by sacrificing oneself. The purpose of Zanmari is just to die with Shimo. Perceiving the thoughts in the other party's heart, Shimo shook his head in disappointment and said calmly. Since I have chanted and denied the past to gain the power beyond the limit, then everything in the past should be negated. Your belief in Aizen has caused this power to be imperfect, so. I saw Shimo lightly raise Qianzhang's Zanpakutō off, Sunlight Lake. Feel the power of space. The voice fell, so did the sniff. From a visual point of view, it is impossible for his attack to fall on Zanmari. However, the next moment, the gleam of light on Zanmari's body stopped abruptly. As Shimo Ryotsu continues to strengthen, on the contrary, he is constantly being pressed back into his body. Accept the reality. Shimo looked at Zanmari indifferently and said. The gap between you and me can't be narrowed by returning to the blade again. Kendo. No vain thoughts. The ability to explode the space is expressed in ultimate Kendo skills. When Zanpakutō fell, the enemy seemed to have Mount Sumeru constantly oppressing him. Unstoppable stagnation power, unless its Ryotsu level can surpass Shimo a lot. But this matter, to Zanmari, is nothing short of a fantasy. As if grasped by an invisible hand, Zanmari's body is deformed and twisted. The unreleasable power rushed in his body. The next moment, the whole empty watermelon was like a ripe watermelon, being beaten by gravity with a stick. Advertisement boom. The purple-black soul escapes and returns to Hueco Mundo. 6th Espada Zanmari Ruro. Death. Another Espada's death completely broke the situation in the void soul barrier. Shihuan Yoruichi also began to try to intervene in other people's battles. Except for a beast that is addicted to fighting, she uses her Shunpo's speed advantage to constantly help others guide the direction of the battle. However, what puzzles Shimo is it seems that the other Zanmari did not perform the second stage of the battle like the one that was at war with him. Under the Great Mighty Sword, Zanmari was completely defeated. Here, whether it's the soul separation or the body, the existence of Espada who has just been promoted to 6th is completely eliminated in the Hueco Mundo. I just can't understand how arrogant you Shinigami are. Blue Master Aizen, long live ah! And the shouts before his death echoed far, far away. Unfortunately, such words of loyalty cannot reach Aizen's ears. Perhaps he would not care about Zanmari's death at all. From beginning to end, Zanmari Lu Ruben was a blind and foolish believer. He seems to be full of eyes, but he is the blindest existence in the entire Hueco Mundo. Hoo-ha, hoo-ha-ha-ha. Excited laughter came from Zaraki Kenpachi's mouth. It makes people happy. This is the fight I want. At this moment, his injury seemed to be the most serious in the void soul barrier. The straight-to-back fighting style makes people fully understand that they can't. Grimmjow has vaguely retired, but he was entangled in it, which made it impossible to get out.
When Manticore died, he had already realized one thing.
The battle to annihilate the invasion of Shinigami has begun to come to an end. The loser is undoubtedly the Hueco Mundo side. Therefore, Grimmjow completely let go of everything, regarded the battle before him as the last battle in his lifetime, and took out a state of 120%. After liberation, the whole person became a leopard man.
The streamlined body allows him to take advantage of his own speed to ultimate.
As a result, terrible scars were left on Zaraki Kenpachi's body. The blood ran down his chest, and a clean smile appeared on Zaraki Kenpachi's face, which made him behave particularly cruelly. What a lunatic. It is that Grimmjow has completely given up the hope of life, but is still surprised by the way Zaraki Kenpachi fights. A fight completely ignoring his own injuries. You stab me, I must see it on you. In his opinion, the sturdy Shinigami in front of him is not enjoying the battle, but the pain. Grimmjow opened his huge blue claws with both hands, covering the sky.
Claws of the Leopard King. Ding. The claws of the Leopard King that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky were blocked by a tattered Zanpakutō.
Ha, admirable opponent. Unfortunately, the potential is too bad. Zaraki Kenpachi seems to have seen through the power of Grimmjow.
At this moment, a familiar voice reached his ears.
If the battle is not resolved, then I'm going to get involved. Hearing this, Zaraki Kenpachi's face suddenly appeared uncomfortable.
Oh, disgusting guy, I really want to hack you to death here.
Shimo glanced at him lightly, not worrying about irritating him at all. Pity. You can't beat me. Zaraki Kenpachi was anxious, and slashed Zanpakutō's strength, which suddenly increased a bit.
For a while, Grimmjow's pressure doubled. Does this guy have no limits? 1. Why does his strength increase again every time he is wounded?
Also, it is a miracle that he has not died after she shed so much blood.
The Leopard King roared and screamed up to the sky.
The agitated Ryotsu, intertwined between his claws, came forward with great power. Advertisement, tear the soul. With a roar, Grimmjow broke out his strongest moves. Upon seeing this, Zaraki Kenpachi's eyes lit up. He held Zanpakutō with both hands and raised it high. The scary golden Ryotsu turned into substance and rose to the sky. A huge face like a skull appears above it. Kendo, 2 breaks. For the first time, the only Kendo of Zaraki Kenpachi's master was shown in front of Grimmjow.
At the same time, it was the last time. When the dazzling gold was cut off, the terrifying Ryotsu followed.
Destroy, completely devour Grimmjow. 5th Espada, Grimmjow Yaka, Jack is dead. Not long ago, Yami hadn't even had time to fully burst out his own power. It was sanctioned by Nilakui's gun. The double-headed javelin turned by Gao Tabu's brigade. Hundreds of times will pat Yacha's forehead. In the emptiness of nothingness, his eyes dimmed suddenly, and there was no more chance. The next moment, it was transformed into an escaped soul, disappearing in Hueco Mundo. When he looked around the entire virtual soul enchantment, but Han found that there was only one side left in the battle. Unohana Retsu versus Ulquiorra. Cipher, at this moment, Ulquiorra seems to be back, incarnate as a black winged demon. The black wings that cover the sky are like despair shrouded in people's hearts. The white one-piece robe adds a bit of proud color to it. As an Espada, Ulquiorra's strength level is also very worthy of recognition. And his opponent, in Soul Society, also belongs to the legendary existence. Unohana Retsu, who owns the unprecedented villain, first-generation Kenpachi and other titles. At this moment, she has already untied the braids on her chest. The flying Lifa adds a somewhat strange beauty to it. In her hands, it was supposed to be the Kendo of murder technique, but it gave people an artistic sense of beauty. Pina's figure flickered under the black Ryotsu rain. Every slash of Unohana Retsu will definitely threaten Ulquiorra. But I don't know why, the battle progressed to such a point, Eggjiwali still did not use his own solution. And Ulquiorra doesn't seem to use the Erden Gaijin either, perhaps because Unohana Retsu has not yet brought it enough threats, leading to its failure to comprehend. And just when the other battlefields are over, Eggjiwali realized the gaze he cared about. She launched a high-speed step, and at the same time exerted strong sword pressure, forcing Ulquiorra to retreat. After that, Kazi-Huali directly withdrew from the battlefield. Shimo-kun. Unohana Retsu who returned to Shimo's side, although his hair was loose and his body was stained with blood red. However, its own beauty is not reduced by the slightest. On the contrary, because of this special state, it gives people a strange beauty. Shimo's eyes drooped slightly and the corners of his mouth raised. Sister Wa, why don't you keep fighting? If you want, we can wait for you by the side. Hearing this, Unohana Retsu's face is rarely hesitant. She looked at Ulquiorra and seemed to regret her battle. But soon, she shook her head slightly. No, this Mr. Blackwing Great Demon is very powerful, but he does not use Kendo. Not to mention Eggjiwali's gaze stayed on Shimo's face for a moment, then moved away. Shimo felt stunned. Obviously, Unohana Retsu didn't want to influence his decision or plan just because of fighting alone. Thinking of this, Shimo sighed slightly and said, if this is the case, let's make a quick fight. With that, his figure disappeared from the place. Ulquiorra looked at the person in front of him warily, the moonlight sword in his hand shining brighter and brighter. Looking at Ulquiorra who was very alert, Shimo said lightly, continue our battle in this world. 4th Espada. Ulquiorra Cipher.